Yep, you ready?
Yep. Let us know when it's on.
Yep.
All good. Ready, Joe?
So we're away. Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Services and Organisation Committee, the first meeting for the new council. Welcome the new councillors.
Thanks.
Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, the Gubbi Gubbi or Kabi Kabi people, and pay respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. No apologies, all in attendance, all in the room. No presentations today, deputations. We'll get underway with item 1, the Audit and Risk Committee membership. Deb.
Okay, good afternoon, councillors. This report is recommending just a couple of minor changes to the Audit and Risk Committee policy, charter. The Audit and Risk Committee meets quarterly, and there's normally attended by the our external auditors, which is Queensland Audit Office, often by our internal auditors, and then our councillor members and our external members. So just to give you a bit of background. So the changes that are proposed here are to remove the mayor as being a position on the committee and instead putting a councillor as being that representative, and also recommending an increase to the sitting fees. Our sitting fee has traditionally been quite low, and it hasn't changed over the last couple of years, and what we're recommending is an increase to what is recommended in the actual document. So that's $800 per meeting for the chair, who is an external member, and then the other external member at $600 per meeting.
And just to clarify for those that may be watching online, what was the previous remuneration for?
Oh dear, that was $300 per meeting.
Yeah.
And look, with our external members, one of our members is a local person. The other one was a person from Brisbane. So the travelling and expenses and time were never charged on top of that. So that was the standard sitting fee. So we're recommending an increase to those fees to recognise the time that they actually spend in the meeting, but also their commitment and time that they spend reading minutes, agendas, etc. So
I understand that's in keeping with standard remuneration.
It is. Just to give you an idea, like with Sunday Council, for example, which is an extreme up north, their fees are $1,200 plus travel and accommodation, but they are a bit more remote. Gympie, on the other hand, was around the $300. It was actually $200, but I'm not sure if they're looking at increasing their fees this year. So just to give you some idea from a comparison point of view. I didn't obtain any further comparisons. I'm sorry, I didn't have the time, but at least it gives you an idea of where we sit.
Yeah. So Deb, I noticed that's not in the recommendation. So are you comfortable if there's going to be a change in the sitting fees for that to be part of the recommendation as well?
It's mentioned in the report, but
it's mentioned in the report.
Yes, it's mentioned in the report. No, it's not. And a lot of charters don't actually contain the sitting fee. Might have to take some advice on that, Brett.
It's something if you wish to put into the recommendation.
We can
endorse that, but it's like an administrative amount or administrative type issue. I'm going to deal with it through a normal process, but you can do it either way.
Yeah. I only say that because we're in agreeing to this. We're also in essence agreeing to an increase in the fees.
Yeah.
So it just makes it more explicit. And the question I have, just a clarifying question in the change to the policy about removing the mayor but saying 2 councillors. 2 councillors still includes the mayor.
Yes, it could. That's right, and that's mentioned in here.
More,
but it doesn't exclude
gives them
the
more
mayor.
latitude.
Yeah.
The mayor and one other councillor to be 2 councillors.
Yeah.
Until the chair, until we change that, you don't have that flexibility. So,
Okay.
And I think recommendation B makes it clear that
that's what we're looking to do.
The tabs off the rank, the and the councillor.
I'm glad you brought that up, Councillor Wilkie, because that's actually something I clarified with the CEO in other committees. The mayor is required to be on those committees.
So under the Local Government Act, for what's called the Standing Committee, which is the other committee, the mayor must be a member of that. But an audit committee is not a standing committee, so it's not a mandatory requirement that the mayor must be in. So often it is the case, but it's not mandated.
So it's only the standing committees that the mayor is required to be a part of. No other committees is the mayor compelled to be part of. Thank you for clarifying.
Deb, Deb, in relation to the sitting fees.
Yeah.
I recognise the degree of expertise that these external committee members and chair people bring to the audit risk committee. I just want a little bit more clarification as to why in the past the position's been unpaid, and now, and it seems like an odd time to be wanting to introduce a pay increase given that we're in a COVID-19 situation. Why the change of policy, and why now, given that in the past it was recognised as, I think your words was a commitment to the Noosa community, and they were actually not being paid as a sitting fee, they were only being reimbursed for travel expenses.
No, we were actually, excuse me, but Councillor, they did actually receive a sitting fee.
$300.
Yeah, $300.
Okay, it actually says that it was not paid. I've sort of understood. It says other external members currently receive a payment of $300 per meeting to cover associated travel and other related expenses. Other than the expense reimbursement, the positions are unpaid and confirm the external members' commitment to serving the Noosa community.
My understanding of the way that this was written by the governance advisor was the amount does cover travel and related expenses. Those related expenses can also be, a person may have to take time off work to be able to do that. The expense reimbursement for positions are unpaid and confirm the external members' commitment to serving. No, it doesn't read as well as it should.
So it does include their workload,
Yeah.
so it should be a sitting fee then.
So what happens at the moment, they get a flat $300 fee.
Yep.
Yep.
No matter whether they drive up from Brisbane today or live locally or whatever. And that's been in place since about 2014.
Yeah.
Yep.
And why now is that the other thing we're doing here is that we'll need to go out and recruit new members.
Yep.
What we've been trying to do is to have succession planning in place for our external members. So when we appointed originally in 2014, we got 2 very good external members. And after 5 years, it's often a good idea to change over or turn over after a period of time. And so the intent was that we changed over one of our external members last year. We had one of the associates from KPMG, had done 5 years, he was fantastic. We've recruited a new person who's come on board last year, and we'll need to recruit a new chair this year for the other person to change over. When I went out last time, about 12 months ago, for that other recruitment, quite a few candidates raised with me that fee was much lower than a lot of other councils that they on audit committees or other audit committees they're on. So we're about to go out again for a chair, and I thought it'd be appropriate now to get our rate more in line with market. So that's the why now. But you're right about the COVID issue. It's an interesting time.
It's an odd time to be introducing 100% pay increase.
Yeah, so it's a 300. It's gone from 300 to 600. Deb. That's
right.
irrespective of what it's for. That's
yes.
the difference.
And the chair does take on some additional responsibilities in his role in forming the agenda, in evaluating the success of the committee on an annual basis. So there are other things that the chair takes on, and that recognises that the chair is being. That's why it's been recommended for $800.
What was he previously on?
The same.
The 300. Everyone was on
Yeah.
300. So
That's
he's
right.
on 5. Okay.
Yeah. Well, given the questioning by Councillor Lawson, it would be more prudent to wait until we have a new chair to consider the fee increase.
Well, the question is on the recruitment, whether you will get better recruits who are paying more market rates. And
It's understood that as part of the process, when they come on board, it's $800 as opposed to now.
well, unless I have that authority, I'm not going to be able to
Yeah,
recruit on that
it's a
basis.
considerable increase in light of.
It
I
is.
mean, in light of the times we're
It
in,
is.
I think.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
I think.
Brett, can I make this suggestion? Can we perhaps introduce, a local content style approach to recruiting a chair, and maybe that will impact on how much we pay the chair. Surely there's someone in the community or within a 50k radius that can fill the position. Again, I think we need to be conservative when paying fees. Again, I respect the degree of expertise these guys bring to the conversation, and we need them. But I think Plan A should always be let's go local, and let's look at getting value for money.
Yeah, when we recruited just over 12 months ago, we ended up with a pretty good field actually, who put their hand up. I remember getting down to about the last 3 or 4 2 or 3 of those were from outside the region, a fair way ahead of the 4th one.
Okay.
So that's why the chap we've got at the moment is a audit partner at one of the major Brisbane accounting firms, and very experienced in local government, a former CEO of a council, but done audits of local governments for 20 years or so. So we actually get pretty good value out of someone like that who can come in and give us advice and a clean set of eyes. So
I think the other thing is being remote as opposed to being with,
sometimes easy
they
to
look with the
And it's a
without
big
that
drive up
local
into-
knowledge perspective, and it is a clean pair of eyes without being influenced from being in the region. So I do think there is some merit. There's some benefit to having an external person.
it is a tricky one about the perception now in the middle of COVID, and do we look at fees or whatever?
Yeah, it's tough.
And if we weren't doing a recruitment, I'd probably say let's just hold it for the moment. But I'm happy either way, whatever the council wants to go. But on balance, I'd probably suggest that we do it so we can get the best person.
Can I just ask a question again, Deb? You mentioned you had some comparative pricing. Could you have those figures again, please?
Oh, look, and these are, so Gympie was $200 with their sitting fees, but I don't know if they have reviewed them. And somewhere like the Whitsunday Coast, they're a lot, they're
sites, aren't they?
yeah, they are, but they're physically removed. So $1,200 and then plus travel and plus accommodation expenses.
On top of that?
Yeah.
And is that just for a member or the chair?
No, that's for a member.
For the member.
Frank, I actually had a look and did some research. There is actually a formula. And so I don't think the amount that we're proposing, 600 and 800, is unreasonable. My question is, do we look local and timing?
Yeah.
They're my 2 issues. But the formula is really quite good, so it just factors into additional work. If it's an hour and a half, and it's all formula based. So if they're here at a sitting meeting for 3 hours, you add an hour and a half. So whatever their rate is, and so if these guys are getting paid 500 an hour, 750 is actually reasonable. So I respect where the amounts come from. Again, timing, and let's explore local options.
I agree with you in terms of timing. Local for me, it's about what's the best person, where they come from,
Totally.
and it might be Brisbane, it might be local, it might be whatever.
Yeah.
But timing is, it's a tricky one.
I do think there's some merit to be had for someone out of the region with fresh eyes, or a really different approach, or a different.
Yeah, and what we did the last term, actually, a couple of times, we actually invited the CEO of Gympie to come down and sit in on our meetings as well. And I did some of theirs, where you go and have a look, and fresh eyes can go, hey, what are you doing it this way for? And that sort of fresh eyes can help.
It's also an opportunity for them to take stuff away for their benefit as well. We can each share.
Our current chair is local. Scott Williams, he's the chair currently on the business roundtable for the Business Mentors Network.
That's right.
Okay.
That's Scott.
Yeah,
so he's chaired for 6 years. He's excellent. But again, his term's coming to an end, and he was good enough. His term was actually due to expend in August, and I've asked him to extend till the end of the year, so we have, we can go through a recruitment period, not in the middle of COVID. So,
in terms of governance, is there a committee that has a greater role to play in the integrity of an organisation like Noosa Council?
Well, the council itself, I guess.
Council itself,
the council meeting is.
But all this governs all internal processes and protects against fraud.
Strategic risks.
You sat on the Audit Risk Committee. You've got
it's
good
very
idea,
comprehensive.
As have I, understanding.
I've never had a meeting that went shorter than 4 hours.
Yeah.
Now you tell me.
No, really, you're going to love it, Amelia. You've got an eye for detail. You're going to really love it. Yeah.
So
look, maybe we'll just go through the general. Go through the general.
And see what the council's thinking in relation
I'm happy
to
to
fee
support
issues.
the 8 and 3, but
I've got one.
Yeah.
I actually, Amelia, can you circulate that information you've got on the formula?
Yeah, I played around and found some information. Yeah.
The question I've got is with regard to the payment to the chair. Do we, and in the interest of transparency and openness, do we state this anywhere else apart from in? Is it clearly visible of what an Audit Risk Committee chair or member would receive anywhere else in council if we didn't include it here as a part of the recommendation or in the charter?
It'd be in the detail of the budget show, but it's a pretty micro.
Yeah,
level,
well,
so,
you wouldn't have that specific. So from a specific perspective, I take Frank's point.
Maybe then when we look at it on Monday at General Committee, whichever way we want to go, we actually include that in the recommendation. Yeah.
All right.
Deb, in relation to periodic rotation, that's mentioned, I think, on page 8. can we include periodic rotation of councillors to achieve again the same goal, to maintain independence of the committee and introduce new perspectives to deliberations? I think that's probably something that the new councillors would jump on. Every 2 years rotate committees.
I think we do that as a matter of course anyway.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And that's why you're coming on, but I've just done my 2 years.
So it's
that's
2 years rotation,
Yeah.
councillors and
we have
external members.
by default done that.
And I think that's
written
when we get to the appointments report later on in the agenda,
Yep.
is when we look at committee chairs as well. I think it's a good thing to change those every 2 years as well. So
Fantastic.
it's, we haven't moved around enough.
Deb,
The lights have gone out.
Was the change from the mayor and one and the cross out of the mayor and one to 2 councillors on the basis that people would have more of an opportunity to be on this committee?
Yes.
And otherwise you're stuck on there for 4 years.
That's pretty good it was. And
Yeah.
yeah, Noosa, I did.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. It allows a bit more rotation and get more councillors across that. I think it's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Right, so if there's no other questions,
I'll move it.
we'll move a referral to General Committee
Yeah.
for further consideration. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you, Claire. Mr. Rookie.
Yep.
So all in favour? Thank you. We'll refer that to General Committee on Monday for further discussion.
Okay.
Item 2, amendment to Councillors' Acceptable Request Guideline Policy.
Okay, so Council originally approved an acceptable request policy in 2015, so some time ago. So it was appropriate to review the policy, but also in line with the legislative changes, and identified that in the very first section of the report, the changes following the Local Government Electoral Act, implementing Stage 2 of OCARA and other legislation amendment act. So I did, that was part of the reason. The other was that our previous policy referred to our old corporate plan and our old themes and our old vision. So it really was timely to review it. Normally when we put a policy up for amendment, we would give it to you in track changes mode, so you can easily see where the changes have been made. Now, I didn't in this case because it looked extremely messy, so I decided to do it as a rewrite. But what I did distribute to you yesterday is just what the previous version was, so you could see the difference. But I'm quite happy to sort of go through the old policy and give you a bit of an idea of what has actually changed, if you'd like to. It really comes down to the changes in the legislation, which are the last few points under the section of the Act.
As I read it through, I went,
yeah.
I can't remember what we had before, because this follows Bill. This just follows what we've been following as a result of Bill Carter.
Yeah, yeah. It's the changing the conditions around the timeframes for the CEO to respond to a request from a councillor. It's and the documentation of the request. It's those finer points, the last 3. So.
Anybody need any further clarification?
I did, just from my point of view, because the old legislation said the mayor may give a direction to the CEO or a senior executive employee.
Yes.
But over here it says the mayor may give a direction to the CEO, however, it must not be inconsistent. Oh no, sorry, it cannot give a direct
That's
direction.
right. That's the changes.
So
that's the changes in
Like
legislation.
legislation has gone back and forth over the years, so they've changed about 3
I
or
was
4
just looking
times.
at the
Yes.
So that's good for me to know.
Yes,
So
definitely.
probably I think last September they changed that again, so that now that's the only person that the mayor can give a direction to is the CEO.
Yeah.
It's going to be a bit broader than that.
Can I ask Deb, can we, this is a council staff written policy, this is a council written staff policy, a council staff written policy, excuse me, that includes these changes, legislative changes.
That's right.
I had a look at the council request guidelines and also council employee code of conduct.
Yes.
And there were some parts of that I would like included in the policy. I just think that at the moment the policy doesn't help me as a councillor discharge my duty of due care and diligence. That in order for me to exercise due diligence, I'm going to need more than a request of the nature of a simple question that can be verbally responded to. I'm going to be needing more than information that either the public or a more senior member of local government is given. I would like a lot more advice. I'd like advice including copies of legal advices, data, council documents, and under the council request guidelines, a councillor may request, and I'm quoting, council employees should provide advice to assist the councillor carry out his or her responsibility, and that the CEO provide information such as records and documents relating to Noosa Council. Under the Employee Code of Conduct, reference is made to advice given to elected officials that council employees have a responsibility to provide such relevant advice as requested by a councillor, and in doing so must ensure that such advice is thorough, and I repeat thorough, responsive, objective, independent, apolitical and impartial. I'd like that extended. I'd like that added to what we can, what we are allowed to ask for. At the moment, the request is for the nature of a simple question that can be verbally responded to. What concerns me about that is that a simple question that may be verbally responded to opens the floodgates to workplace disagreements. Council staff advice, in my opinion, must be communicated in written form to carry legal status and to also avoid misunderstandings and, more importantly, to avoid denial. So I really would like to maybe refer this to general meeting and debate it a little bit more.
Do you want to outline in writing before that meeting to start what the nature of the changes that you think that need to be made?
Yeah, I just
in reference and circulate that to the other councillors so we can have a look at the nature of the changes you're proposing.
Are you proposing that every request has to be in writing? Every answer has to be in writing?
Yeah, I do. Otherwise, the other option I have is, are you okay for us to record a verbal advice? I would like it in writing, yeah, I would. Or be allowed to record the verbal advice.
So if we want to go and talk to a council staff member about what's happening at such and such,
yep,
and they give us a quick feedback about what's happening, they have to put that in writing.
Totally, because if we rely on that information, and then if we rely on that information and it's misrepresented, it's he says, she says. So I would like, rule number one in business for me is put it in writing. So I'm happy to say that this conversation took place and send you an email, just so that I have a written record of the conversation, in case it ever comes to bite me in the bottom.
So there
Deb, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, look, just looking at the differentiation from what the old policy was to the new, I think, where I sort of questioned it, and it's probably not to the extent that Amelia's talking about, but I did question it, was council employees to provide advice to assist the councillor to carry out his or her responsibilities. Advice, carry out his or her responsibilities is the key there, and it's changed from that to the request is of the nature of a simple question that can be verbally responded to. So I understand that I understand what Amelia's saying, but I also understand there's constraints with that, in that there's time constraints, and it takes takes an informal conversation and makes it very formal. I understand that, but I'm wondering maybe if we could, definitely I think we're going to have to take it to general, but there might be a happy medium where we can come back to something like there once was.
Well, I'd suggest that you provide in writing if requested. You don't need it in writing every single time.
Yeah. Not every single time, but if something is complex in nature, or something that we are going to relay to a resident,
or rely on
it needs to be in written format. Otherwise, it carries no legal status.
I think that's the format. Is that upon request, if you require it in writing, so that you've got that supporting documentation, well and good. But there are a number of times where we just have to ask a question and get a yes or no answer. We don't need it in writing.
So what I'm asking is that actually gets included in council policy.
Got no problem with that.
So I think it comes back to the context of what the scale of the issue is. So if it's Claire and I catch up almost every day out of the office. What are you up to? We don't sort of document everything we talk about. No. Because it's just a quick catch up and doing things like that. So it's about when you need to have something in writing, or whether it's easier to do it verbally. At what point does that cross over? And that's a bit of judgment on behalf of both the councillor and the staff member about when you reach that point. I think the risk is if we try and specify too much one way or the other,
Yep.
and how do we get that? And it's a matter of judgment.
Yeah.
My
There's
understanding
Maybe
is
we
what
have the
Hang on,
request
just one at a
stop.
time,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, maybe it could be at the request stop. So if I
Yeah.
catch up with
that's what I'm talking
Alison
about.
and say, hey, how you going? Where's the local charity? Can I come along?
Yeah.
I don't need that in writing. But if
Yeah.
Amelia goes down and talks to someone and needs that or relies upon that information, she can say, can I have that information?
Can
So
you
it's that ability
follow
to
up?
get it
Can
in
you follow up
writing.
our conversation and just
Yeah.
document that for
What's
me?
the
so
policy
I've
say about this?
Yeah.
Is there anything in this policy that precludes a council of asking for advice?
got- No, I would have thought. that.
So do we,
No.
and to take Amelia's point on board, do we need to make that explicit that the council has the right to request advice in writing?
I would have always thought that was implied anyway.
Yeah,
So
we need to
Yeah.
make
There's
that
nothing
explicit to,
excluding it.
Maybe we could formalise
Yeah.
that.
yeah.
What I would probably say, if I could just share this with you, as Brett was alluding to, there's, requests are different. It might be as simple as, what's the progress of the concreting of the path,
Yeah.
and it might be a verbal response that's easily given. There can be a situation where a staff member might be asked a question by a councillor, and they may have some information, but they may not have all the information, and to be able to respond properly to that councillor's question, it may need to be elevated to the manager or someone further. And if it requires some investigation or time which takes the officer away from their normal job, then the officer has to account to their manager for what they're doing as well. So, there are those sorts of considerations as well. What the policy does provide for that, you can request the information, you can go through the CEO, and there are timeframes with that, especially for the more complex things, or you can go, or if you went to a director, for example, depending on what the issue is. So the policy does provide to be able to go to the CEO, but it has to sort of cover everything. So it can be a very basic question that might be well within that officer's ability to be able to answer, but it may also not be. And at that point, then what we're saying is, well, that officer should then elevate it with their manager or director to be able to provide an appropriate response. So
my thought process on this, I mean, if you ask a verbal question, you expect a verbal response. If you want it in writing, you ask for it in writing and expect a written response.
Yeah.
That would be the way that I would. Or look, thanks for that. Can you send me? Look, I appreciate that. There's a bit more information there than I can. Can you get that to me in writing and follow up in that way, shape or form? Just a simple verbal request for it to be followed up in writing. But I mean, the way that I've usually got with staff, if it's a verbal request, it's a verbal response. If it's a written request, I get an email back or something along that.
But a councillor has the right to request advice in writing at any time.
Absolutely,
Of course.
absolutely. No one would say, look, can you put that in writing so that I've got it so I can respond to
Fantastic.
So if we need
I'd
to
love
clarify
included.
that.
Yeah, just a little bit more
Yeah.
detailed
Yeah.
policy would be great.
Again, it depends on the context. Like that one the other day for you,
Yeah.
Claire asked for advice. I thought I'll give you this one in writing because it's for her protection
Yeah.
of the future as well. And
Yeah.
even though it started off the verbal conversation,
Yeah.
so it ended
Yeah.
up in that
Exactly.
place.
And I guess managers and directors are more okay with
Yeah.
the need to hang on. I probably
Yeah.
need to write that down to make sure
Yeah.
that all the detail is true and correct for you, rather than
Yeah.
just give it to you here so that you understand it fully.
Okay. All right. So we will revisit
All right, so-
that.
So apart from the changes for the mayor, there's really no changes in terms of the way the councillors would interact with staff as a result of the new legislation.
No. As I said, it's the only change that's coming is there's a bill before Parliament at the moment which looks at councillors giving directions to administrative staff, but that's something we will have to revisit once it's actually passed. It's not necessarily under this policy.
Did we correct that elsewhere with regard to the mayor being up to direct her admin staff?
No, that's coming.
That's coming.
the
It hasn't
legislation
happened
typical
yet.
Parliament hasn't come in at the
I thought
moment.
we'd done something along those lines.
We reported the
Flagged it
changes that were coming,
Ah,
but
is
they
that what
haven't
we've done?
actually, with everything
that what
going
we've
on,
done?
they've
Sorry.
been
There's a
held
bit of
up.
legal friction going on at the moment. All around Queensland. Well, for example, Claire has to talk to Kathy, PA, to get stuff done. And
Technically, you can't
correct.
tell her, type me a letter or go and photocopy this for
It's
you.
crazy. So the state is looking at just clarifying that
Yeah.
that can happen in terms of the elected representatives and admin staff to deal with
Something
that.
we discussed.
Yeah, but that's not a major issue.
All right, so Amelia, do you want to move that gets referred to General Committee for?
Yes,
so
please.
do you want to just in terms of clarify, Steve, do you want Deb to work up some extra wording in terms of what that would
That
look
would be
like in the
fantastic,
document?
Deb. And
then
can
we could get
can
that
you have a
onto-
look at the council code of conduct and also the council request guidelines, because there was just a little bit more meat in those documents?
We could refer, without duplicating those codes or sections from those things, we could make reference to the Council Code of Conduct and the request guidelines.
And it's not better to call up that in case that document changes rather than sort of replicating it into the document. You actually cross-refer.
And if you think there's any need to amend any of it, you've got the right in the General Committee to put those recommendations forward or those amendments forward for consideration.
Fantastic.
So Deb will do a further report for Monday, which will just incorporate those changes into an updated document.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
that's all right.
Yeah,
that's great.
Once you've seen the agenda, you'll see what the proposed changes are. If you think there's anything further required, you've got the right to make those amendments.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, seconder. Frank.
Yep.
Being no further discussion or questions, all in favour? Thank you. Referred to General Committee. Item 3.
Okay, so
I've just lost it on my screen.
you're right. I'll wait for you, Joe.
Where are we up to?
Councillor expenses.
Page 7, Joe.
There we are. Expenses reimbursement provision facilities policy. Yeah.
Okay, so this policy is policy that is routinely reviewed with new council. So it sets out the support and assistance that council provides to councillors, and there are some options within this. For example, in relation to a vehicle allowance or claiming your mileage. So you do have some options within this. And the changes in this one are actually highlighted to give you the benefit of seeing the differences there.
This is one the legislation requires new councils to revisit within 6 months of the beginning of the term, so every council has to.
And the loss of the allowance with regard to the LDMG, or sorry, the changing there, I'll rephrase that. Is because we had a change in the facilitation of the phone system that we were using with regard to that communication. So
and the way that
just for your benefit, in case you weren't aware.
Yeah, no, I saw that, but thank you. I wasn't sure why.
Yeah, and the way that was charged, it was actually charged to the Telstra account of the mayor. So when we ceased using that, then we needed to take that away, and it needed to be provided for.
It's no longer charged to the mayor's account. That's right.
Probably the only thing I'd like to add, Deb, is under council policy, professional development and representation, just in keeping with transparent and open governance, we should probably state what that amount is for the community's benefit.
I think it is stated in there, isn't it?
Oh, I couldn't find it.
Further down, with regard to discretionary funding.
Oh, fantastic, sorry. Yep, $1,500.
Isn't it discretionary funding, $1,500 per year, which can be carried over
for 1 year.
For 1 year.
For 1 additional year, and the professional spend is at the discretion of the mayor and the CEO and the budget.
Right.
I've just got a minor question. Deb, under 7, administrative support, councillors will be provided with the following: access to suitable hot desks at the Taunton office.
Yes.
Is a hot desk a shared desk? Whereas we're actually
just a bit warm.
Just no.
Our desks are we've actually got individual desks.
Yes, yeah.
What is the hot desk?
Well, that is the concept is that a person could use any one of those desks, but I know that within the room that they have been allocated out, because people also like certain positions within the room. So
well, essentially,
we've got our names on each one.
Yes, yeah. So that's what's referred to there as well.
In fact, I only saw that the other night. Someone suggested, aren't these used as hot desks? No, I always sit at this desk.
Yeah. The only other people
desk.
that use those desks are in a disaster situation. You might have the communications team working for that room, for example. But otherwise,
shared beyond the councillor.
That's the only
that'd be the only exception. Other than that, nobody else uses that room.
Yeah, mine is often used when LDMG is in and most of our council computers are used when LDMG is in. We've got media in there, for example. We also facilitate radio checks and all the rest of it in there and the like. It's not just wholly and solely for our use, so it does get used by other staff at times.
I'll move it.
Seconder, thank you, Claire. No further questions or discussion? All in favour? Thank you.
Thanks, Deb.
That's all right.
Thanks, Deb.
See you later.
Thanks, Deb.
Item 4, CEO, council representation on various boards, external organisations and working groups. I noticed there has been an update from when we first discussed it. with some councillors realising that the amount of workload that they tried to take on.
Yeah, I think Amelia
Yeah.
wanted to get this. I think Frank, Joe, she swapped out with you.
Yep, on the Taunton
Taunton
Sports Complex.
Taunton, yeah.
And also the walking
Thank
and
you.
cycling strategy, I think, was the other Amelia.
Thank you.
Brian's on that one now.
Can I just
Yeah.
ask with regard to the sports complex committees that the relevant staff member is aware that,
Yeah, so what
that we're
happens?
back in that frame because
So
we weren't being consulted on?
So once this is adopted by council, obviously all the relevant staff, we often will write, particularly to the external groups, and say, you know, Councillor Smith's now being appointed, and put you in touch with them. There are lots of them. So
Yeah.
I forget how many there are.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and there's still others we've already gone through. Do we need to? I said I'll take up your point here, Amelia, earlier. Do we need to state anywhere here what the timeframes that we change over on these are, or do we just take that as sort of standard procedure that every 2 years we'll review this and maybe do a bit of a chop and a change around?
Yeah, it's up to council. Generally, it's good practice after 2 years to have a look and just collectively get together and say, you know, who's enjoying this or who wants to share the experience or whatever. And that's audit committee and committee chairs of some of these.
So, Amelia, do you want to document that as such, or are you happy that it's standard procedure that we do every 2 years regardless?
I just think as a matter of consistency, I'd like it documented.
I think 2 years is a good time frame.
Yeah.
Because 1 year, just finding your feet,
Yeah.
you're getting to know it, especially for us, the new councillors, and 2 gives you that duration, but then it gives you enough time to actually have a go at other things.
It also
and-
gives
Correct.
it also gives councillors a chance to cross-pollinate
fresh
and
eyes.
get across other committees that they might not be familiar.
So that would be a point X saying that committees are reviewed, committee positions are reviewed after every 2 years.
Or there's just periodic rotation of committee members
I think-
every 2 years.
I think that the review process would have to be the way to do it, because rotation's difficult, because you have to have a process to rotate. You have to work
Oh,
out.
okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So review.
And I guess if you're doing, like, you're loving tourism, doing great things there, Amelia, and same with you, Frank, everyone's got their pet projects they want to see through. You may want to stay on some, so you may not necessarily rotate.
Yeah, I think
So-
to remember here is some of those groups will cease as well, like the
River
Roy,
Street project.
project related
So the sports complex.
Will-
Maybe.
sports complexes are ongoing.
Yeah.
One like the Hinterland Playground one will cease once the Hinterland Playground's been completed. For example, the Tiwara, the
River Street
Roof
Project
Street one
Control Group.
will likely end. So there are some there that will cease, and others that will come over time as a result of project changes. So we'll also have an opportunity then to, you know, to change or to take on new roles or see roles diminish over time.
2 years is a good time frame.
I'm happy to move that.
Okay, Councillor
I'll
Brookie,
second.
Councillor Lawrenston seconding that. No further questions or discussion? All in favour? With that change,
Good luck and enjoy it.
so with that change, we would, that's only a relatively minor change, we'd have to just do
The protocol is that if it changes sort of the overall intent or whatever, often you refer it to the general committee. But
So I was clarifying, Mr CEO, just to make sure that we haven't done anything that doesn't need to be referred to general. I would have expected so, but away we go. Item 5, Community Disaster Response and Recovery Grants Program.
So Kerry's online.
Kerry. She's somewhere behind me, she's on mute.
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, Kerry.
Hello. And I've also got Alison on line as well, in case there's a technical question that she might be better, more appropriate for her to answer. So, good afternoon, Council. So this report proposes a small change to our community grants for a disaster response and recovery grants program, which is not something that we have had in the past. The proposal for the 19-20 financial year is to allocate a remaining amount from the budget to allow a quick response grant round to go out prior to the end of June. To be able to meet the immediate needs of those organisations that are struggling through COVID-19 or have had, for example, additional welfare responses required from them. It's particularly to meet the needs of community organisations that have not been able to receive funding elsewhere and have had a significant impact on their ability to raise revenue. So to date, the funding provided to community organisations from either the federal or state level has been very much aimed at those organisations that have staff through the JobKeeper program. But even in that space, the staff have to meet particular criteria, which is often difficult for them to meet. So this is to provide some support to those community organisations to help them with what they're currently paid. Happy to take any questions or comments.
Kerry, we're only looking at the remaining grants funding that hasn't been expended at this point in time.
That's correct, Joe. So there was an amount of $27,000 that through the timing of the budget process last year and our grant rounds has not yet been allocated.
I'm assuming, I'm assuming at some stage there'll be a further report or request to council for funds going forward as to what the community may require.
So as part of the 2021 budget process, we will be looking at what support we provide to community organisations, so through that budget process. And council staff are looking at that at the moment in terms of the ordinary 2021 budget process or grant allocations and what we might propose then for 2021 instead.
So in essence, this is just to tide over until for the next 6 to 7 weeks until the budget's finalised.
That's correct, Joe. So at the moment we've got organisations that have got needs right now and waiting another 3 or 4 months until we're able to get into a new financial year, and a new grant round is a very long period for them. So this is proposing a quick response where we would go out with a short time frame, a simple process, because it's only a small grant amount, and then allowing a quick turnaround so that we would aim to get the funds out to them by the end of June.
Have we had any requests to date from community groups?
I'll just throw it at Ali. I mean, in terms of, firstly, obviously we've got community organisations talking to us about what their problems are, the issues they're facing, their drop in revenue, the issues that they've got with their volunteers. I'm not sure whether we've had specific requests for funding. Ali, are you able to answer that?
Yes, we've had specific requests for some funding, absolutely, yes. That could have been as simple as freezers to hold frozen meals, for example.
Okay.
Just checking council's comfortable that we'll make that decision under delegation to keep things moving along quickly, and we'll report back on the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Kerry, could you give us some idea about the acquittal process, what that'll involve?
Yes, so like all of our grant programs, they will be required to submit a formal acquittal. So whereby they need to demonstrate that they've spent the funds in line with what they proposed. So that will be part of our form part of our ordinary process. So they will apply through Smarty grants like we would ordinarily do. And we would go through the same checks and balances, but just in a much faster process because it's a smaller amount of funding and also a much more targeted, narrow program. So it doesn't require the same level assessment as, for example, the normal community grants program.
Thank you.
Nothing further, I'll move it.
Thank you.
Can we second that? Councillor Lauriston. No further questions or discussion? All in favour? You guys have it. Carried unanimously. And we'll go to the ordinary meeting. Item 6, Waste Management. Wayne. 6 monthly report.
Councillors. Hi, Wayne.
Here's your opportunity to get to learn about all of the elements, each of the elements of council as they come to us with their either quarterly or regular updated reports as to how operations are going. Questions?
Wayne, on page 46 or page 2 of your report, materials and services, statement of expenses, as a $330,000 variance between the amount budgeted to be spent on materials and services and the amount actually spent. Is that I know you run a very, it's a big budget. This represents not a huge proportion, but what's going on there?
Proportionally, we did the annual curbside in the first half of the year, so it might be a profiling issue in the budget. We've pulled in a lot of that money early, and there was some processing of concrete that happened early in the year, which would have been unusual because we didn't do it at the end of the previous financial year.
It looks like you've spent less than you expected to. Yeah.
We're 5% under budget at this point in time.
Yeah, 289,000 surplus to budget.
So is that just being prudent, or is there something we haven't completed at this stage? Or?
Some of the expenses come at the end of the year rather than in the first half.
Not a linear function necessarily?
Yeah, and we had an impact on commercial waste because Sunshine Coast Council reduced their charge at the landfill from about $140 to $120. We had a lot of trucks driving past to go to Nambour, so that reduced our revenue.
Any other questions?
The waste transfer station at the moment came up well. Looks good.
Yeah. The resurfacing, yeah. When are we looking at the weighbridge?
Weighbridge is under design at the moment for construction next financial year.
We've got any idea of a time frame of when we're likely to be looking at doing that?
Hopefully early in the first part of the year. There'll be some challenges there in trying to get traffic through the weighbridge while we need to weigh trucks, etc., but also put in a new weighbridge. So there's probably some nighttime activity required. We'll build a prefabricated weighbridge office and drop it in overnight. That's the plan. And we'll have to do some bypasses to get the traffic around the site while we're working on it.
Wayne, can I ask a question? Illegal dumping, I mean, there's been 344 reports of it. How much is a fine for illegal dumping? Does it depend on what's
It depends on the volume and what type of waste. Some of the bigger fines that we've issued have been $2,000.
Yeah.
We've had a creative person recently cut down a tree to retrieve one of our cameras that was in the tree looking at illegal dumping. So we're handing that matter over to the police. We think we know who it is. At this stage we can't name that person, but they almost cut the tree down. We had to go back and finish the job.
It's often challenging to find illegal dumpers. They've either got to be seen or leave evidence.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it a deterrent, the fact that it's not necessarily the cost of the fine, it's the fact we can't get them?
But if there's asbestos involved, that's a hazardous waste that can increase the fines, and for a company to dump asbestos, the fines can range up to $60,000.
Yeah, right.
And the real shame with illegal dumping a lot of the time is it's, I saw an example today, a television set that has been disposed of in the bushland that there is no charge to dispose of correctly at the landfill, for resource recovery and e-waste. E-waste is no charge. Quite often television sets are being dumped, or microwaves or electronic goods that carry no charge. So it's not a matter of often we're said it's the gate fee at the landfill that prevents people from doing it. But really, it's people either not understanding that there are no charges associated with. Often it's only household waste. I mean, there's that could go in a 240 litre bin for normal collection. So I don't. It's strange at times as to why it occurs.
It's a lot.
The other piece of new information we've received is that the waste levy may be held at $75 for the first 3 months of the year. Now, that's a challenge for us, trying to vary the the revenue statement halfway through the first half of the year. It'll
Last
keep
year,
us
didn't we?
gainfully employed. I'd rather them just bite the bullet and say it's $80 or keep it at $75 for the whole year. But
I guess with the COVID environment, they're hedging their bets a bit. Wayne, page 48. Noted that competing waste collection contractors have continued to grow a number of bulk bin customers. Businesses have spoken to claim. Businesses we have spoken to claim the main reason is they can be directly billed monthly and have more control over waste costs. Is that not something that we can do in council operations as well?
if we did it across the Shire, it means sending invoices on a regular basis. The cost of that, we'd need a couple of more accountants just to run that process.
But surely that's an e-billing system that goes, instead of sending a monthly invoice.
I'm not aware of any local government that does that.
But most accounting software is capable of doing it.
Yes. The problem we've got is delivery of bins. Like Cleanaway is set up to deliver bins and provide a regular service. They're not really set up to deliver bins and take them away, and that's what would happen if we had an irregular service, or we would have to increase our price. Let's say
I didn't get that from the nature of what we're talking about here. That it was, you know, this appears to be ongoing services being billed monthly, as opposed to how are we billing them six monthly or in the twice a year through the rates? Cleanaway
or some contractors offer an on-call service, so you can ring up and say my bin is full, come and collect it.
Right.
Some people want that service. We don't provide it, nor do any local governments that I'm aware of.
Okay, so it's a different type of service to the service that we normally deliver, and that's what you're talking about here, being billed monthly and have more control over waste costs.
Yeah.
In that shape or form. That's not the way I read the paragraph, so I didn't understand why that was a hindrance. But if it's an on-call service,
So
like that explains it. Okay.
This particular issue is under discussion at government level at the moment. The waste contractors have argued with the government about taking over or having the ability to market commercial waste services across all local governments. We have a closed shop. There's about 6 councils who are like that. We do that because we don't want 6 contractors going down Hastings Street.
My understanding was I didn't realise it was an on-call service that they were getting billed for, and I understand the difference. I didn't get that from the paragraph there. That was all. The liquid waste contract. Where are the bulk of the properties located that utilise this service? And is there an opportunity to look at facilitating upgrades to liquid waste services? I mean, you know, are we talking about needing to septic or sewer properties, or what other facilitation could we provide if for those 80 residential properties in the long term? Because this appears to be septic holding tanks and the like. Could we upgrade septic systems, or?
They're in unsewered areas, mainly in rural areas that are unsewered, and they relate to properties built on land that doesn't have a good capacity for absorption of liquid waste. So
even newer septic type systems wouldn't facilitate?
People have the option of putting in a septic system which aerates grey water onto gardens, but you can't do that with sewage because there are some health issues around aerating that particular product. And also if they're on a slope, that material runs down into neighbouring properties.
Yeah, but usually there's the newer systems have some sort of an on-site treatment facilitation, and it's a fairly clean product that's then out watering the ground. Is it something that we could look at? Look those 80 properties about maybe facilitating some sort of a.
Some of them are too small to do that.
Okay.
They don't have.
So there are limitations to the properties in general, and a holding tank is the best means of providing this service to them?
We could look at an audit of those properties and see if there's an opportunity for them to convert. the constraint would be that a lot of them have spent money setting up the system now.
For the holding tank.
To go through a process of putting in a new system worth $10,000, I think they'd object to that.
I was looking at maybe some sort of a subsidy scheme or that to go beyond it. I mean, they're paying an ongoing fee for the liquid waste collection. So over a period of time, the equivalent of that over a, I don't know, might be something worth.
We'll certainly have a look at it.
What else do I have? Street litter, place. Oh, waste officers are looking into the program to replace damaged rusted bin poles and the like, and dog poo dispensers are also being replaced and updated where needed. Is this an opportunity to review the style of dog poo bags that we reduce and see if there's a means of reducing costs rather than the single pools, whether we can use rolls or the like? I mean, is there, because I know some of them are actually a lesser cost to acquire than the style that we use it.
We're currently using compostable bags.
Yeah, but sometimes they come in a roll as opposed to... We've
gone to single sheet bags because we had a great problem with people pulling more off than they needed. You know. So
we've actually implemented a change. We've gone to a different style as part of the...
On some of them, yes.
All right. I think that was the last of my questions. Oh yeah, page, even I've had some of the newer councillors, even I had to think about this one. Page 57, environmental works within the next 6 months include groundwater review completed in July. It requires close monitoring of groundwater quality in BH32, BH5 and BH33. Tell us what BH stands for.
Borehole.
For the benefit
of course it does.
I had to think about it for a while, but then I thought I bet you half the councillors around the table.
I knew that.
I bet you half the councillors around the table that. It took me a while before I went, oh, I know what that is.
Yeah, sorry about that. I should have put a little
just for the benefit of those reading the report that what BH stands for and the newer councillors.
Everyone knows now.
That's the last of my questions. Anybody else got anything further?
Could I just... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, please.
Any questions? Page 56,
yep.
There's a graph in green which has no figures on it. Yep. We got into trouble with LMS for divulging the volumes of gas in the past. So they let us show the graph and show
indicative
relative monthly variations but no data because they sell carbon credits on an auction type setup. And their competitors would love to know how much gas they might be going to auction.
So on that way, why the huge spike in March?
I was just hitting the other question like that.
It's like a massive
March,
difference.
We had some rainfall in March, and when we have rainfall and we have leachate generated through the waste volume, that can increase the amount of gas that's produced. If you look at January, February were fairly dry. Another reason for that may be, and I can't verify this, we've been putting lateral lines in, horizontal lines.
I'm going to ask you the lateral lines
to capture more gas.
Right.
And this could have resulted in an increase in the volume.
Compared to the relative volume of rainfall we've had, I'd hope the lateral lines are responsible for at least some percentage of it. The question that raised for me beyond that was, I know the leachate is captured and is piped out and all the rest of it. Is there an opportunity to collect methane from leachate before we dump it to sewer?
No.
No?
No. We capture, the methane gas comes off the rotting putrescible waste in the landfill. We suck that gas out of the landfill through methane wells. When you look at the liquor that comes off, the leachate, there's not a lot of gas that comes off that.
If it was stored in some capacity? Well, I don't know, just a thought. I just had a thought bubble because I thought exactly like that the water was responsible, the rainfall and that may have been responsible for part of this. And I thought, well, if that leachate is going out with a flow, is there a means of capturing that if it can be stored and siphoned off before it's then pumped out to sewer?
We have a tank farm where we capture leachate from the landfill and put it in the tank farm. There are 4 large tanks. If there was a large volume of gas coming off that, we'd have a significant gas flow coming out, and we don't.
We're not getting. All right, that's it. Just a thought bubble with regard to the fluid that if you like. Go ahead.
Wayne, the only thing I want to talk about is the activities that you've planned for May to December 2020, and included in that are talks and landfill visits with schools and community groups. I'd just like to stress the importance of education at a young level, that kids are really our future, and education's paramount.
One of the impacts of COVID has been, we've looked very closely at our whole budget, and we've had to reduce in areas we didn't want to reduce in. And one of those areas has been in the waste education. Now, if council want to revisit that at the budget meeting and increase that allocation, that's a budget discussion.
Is that only from a practical element, the fact that we can't facilitate at this point in time because of the congregation in an educational type facility? Or? There's
an interesting thing going on at the moment. Kids are allowed to get on a bus and sit beside each other, but when they get to the classroom, they have to be 1.5 metres apart, and I can't quite understand that. The schools are resistant to sending kids to the landfill for education at the moment.
Only at this point in time.
But we certainly are going to try and do as much as we can. The other thing that we're looking at is we've had a budget cut. We put on movies and that sort of thing on National Recycling Week, and if we charge for that service, it might be a few dollars or $5, I think we'd get a lot of people coming, and that would pay for the service, and we may be able to increase our activity at no cost to council.
Because that happened, I was just looking at how much success you had from July to December last year with all your initiatives, and one of them was this community screening. It was a 300 people sold out event, and it says paid events. So,
absolutely.
So maybe we could do a few more of those sort of things and to fund that.
We're certainly looking at a charge service.
Sorry, it's just Kerry here. Obviously, though, we're constrained at the moment and will be for some time in terms of gatherings. So you can see the roadmap for the state. Three-stage roadmap only allows for masses, maximum amount being 100 people. So we don't have the roadmap beyond that, and that will be deliberate by the state to be able to contain those mass events and make sure that they are very last in line.
Thanks, Chris.
We've obviously got some constraints then until something like the J reopens. We've got nowhere to facilitate an event such as that. So I gather that's part of the reduction of the education budget in the short term. The fact that we can't facilitate the services of at the landfill or in other capacities. All right. Anything further?
Just on the recycling and waste education talks on page 53, you've outlined all the schools and the preschools that have taken part. We've got kids from preschool age, year 2, 3, 4, 7, 9. You managed to get quite a few of them out to the landfill. You say that there's a reluctance, but it looks like you've done fairly well there up to date.
Emma's done a great job. She's very passionate about waste education, and we've had a very good response from the schools up until COVID.
I think the reluctance only in relation to COVID, since COVID.
And we go to a competition in Marici each year. We weren't paying a fee to enter, but we always won, so we thought we should maybe pay to enter. But our kids are really well educated in the waste area.
And does the feedback indicate that the children are actually educating their parents? In terms of health, recycling.
Yes. They come home. They go home and they tell their parents what they should and shouldn't put in the rubbish bin.
Absolutely. The best auditors we've got.
Yes.
And I said I'm really proud that we've finally managed to get this education facility, because the only education facility that was really around was the one at Nambour for quite some time. A lot of schools
Yeah, it's unreal.
didn't get that opportunity under the joint councils, but under our own facility, this is the sort of thing that we can do and educate our own local kids.
And Wayne, the graph on page 56, which shows the waste to landfill in tonnes, shows a big decrease from around 58,000 tonnes a year back down to around 40,000, and you're holding, from this graph, you seem to be holding steady at 40,000 tonnes to landfill in recent years.
What's actually happening?
I thought it was a worse picture than that. I mean, it's a high amount.
We're getting more waste through the gate as our population grows, and we're a throwaway society. Yeah. We're getting more waste. We're doing better in the recycling area, but it's really difficult to keep up with where we're going in terms of volume. We're trying to keep under 50,000 tonnes at the moment because our licence then trips up and we get a higher licence fee and probably more stringent conditions from DES if we go over the 50,000 tonnes. But that's the challenge at the moment.
But that's an indication of how well we've been diverting every available stream from landfill that we possibly can.
We do very well in the commercial waste area with concrete, brick, timber. We're up around 90% or better.
A lot of those recycle rates have doubled since 2014.
Yeah,
which is very healthy.
And again,
it's a credit to you and your team.
That video that we saw when we had the introduction to waste to the councillors saw how even those bulk bins coming through were then sorted through again to try and capture what they could out of those.
Yeah.
Just one more thing, Wayne, with the waste education talks, I haven't noticed any visits to the Peregian village, Peregian Veggie Village and community villages. Some of these places have composting and do composting very well. That would perhaps be an opportunity for education talks for kids because they can actually understand how the most effective way to reduce gas emissions is actually through composting, and maybe that's an initiative as council we can co-host or co-pay with schools and bring home composting bins and education programs to the schools.
There was a group down at Peregian that were doing composting and
collecting the food waste from the shops.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they're still operating, are they, Frank? No, they lost momentum, but we certainly partnered with them and gave them a lot of information. We have an excellent video on how to compost that was made with Emma made it with Envirocom, who are an educator in Sunshine Coast Council area. And I'd encourage you, if you're interested in composting or you want the community to be exposed to that, have a look at the video. It's online and it's an excellent production.
How long does it go for, the composting video? Is it a couple of minutes?
Oh, it's more than that. It's probably 20 minutes.
Oh, so if we did a movie night for the community down the track, you could, like a trailer, you could potentially run the composting there, but that was only for a couple of minutes.
Certainly, Emma incorporates composting as part of the education package.
Yes, she does.
She goes to schools, and when she actually goes to the schools and delivers it, composting is a huge part of it. I know when we started this process, the Tewantin State School was one of the first to do it, and their waste to landfill and diversion rates went down by something like 80%.
Excellent.
And a lot of that's got to do with food waste and composting in the community garden that they've started up there that is facilitated there. So as these leads go through, each of the schools learn, and the kids learn directly at the schools with regard to food waste
we also
at the locality.
We also take adults on trips to the landfill.
We do.
Some of the aged people might want to go for a visit.
I think one of the most unfortunate parts is that we no longer get trips to the MRF, and people see the recycling process. The MRF actually in the MRF can no longer can no longer host those as a result of occupational health and safety issues. But when a new MRF is done, hopefully we'll get that back. You can actually go and see how the recycling process and all that stuff that comes in the yellow littered bin is undertaken. But there are videos online that you can see it quite clearly, and Clean Away I've got a number of those online as well.
Wayne, on page 59 under section of risk, you mentioned that workplace health and safety risk assessment was done of the Yamundi Road Resource Recovery Centre. Can you just spell out some of the changes that you put in place as a result of that risk assessment?
We had an external consultant come in and do a full assessment of what was going on there because we were concerned. We had a number of near misses where heavy plant nearly run into vehicles and went close to some people who were on the landfill. To overcome that, there's a two-step process. Number one, we've put a spotter on the landfill and we pay Clean Away to have that person there. It's about $60,000 a year, and they're at the landfill in the very busy times just to make sure that plant and people are not interacting in close proximity.
Not necessarily the general public, but when you're referring to people,
This is people dropping off green waste and concrete and children getting out of the car when they shouldn't, and plant working and can't see where they're reversing. So the spotter is the first stage. The second stage is to expand the resource recovery area, and we did have a project in next year's budget, but that's been deferred, to clear some vegetation and to expand the area available so that we can segregate people. And the plan then was to take things like concrete, green waste and put them into a bunker system where the public can go to the bunker and not be interacting with heavy plant.
Much the same way as you do with that first interface where the bin is down here and you come up to a gated section and drop over the edge sort of thing.
Yes, so that way we can have people being loaded with material but not interacting with the heavy plant that is processing material.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been any indication of how the COVID restrictions have impacted on the amount of domestic waste collected? Any way of determining that?
We haven't had a great drop off in domestic waste. In fact, in April we had more visitations than normal. We've had less commercial waste delivered because businesses closed.
Businesses are closed, people are eating at home, so
we'll take
cleaning up.
The challenge now is for me to, I've had people saying, why is the landfill closed? Well, it's not, but we've been running the message that only go to the landfill with essential waste. We now need to start lifting that requirement, but I don't want to say the landfill is open slather because we'll have vehicles backed out onto Yamundi Road. So I just need to work out a strategy of how we get the message out there and get people coming in slowly. And we're certainly looking at that.
When you say vehicles backed out onto Yamundi Road, that's not the normal, that's not situation normal there, is it?
We've had people back there out onto Yamundi Road when, for example, we have a failure in the IT systems at the landfill or a power failure and we can't process payments.
That's not happening now though, is it? Everything's
not at the moment, no.
So why would traffic back out onto Yamundi Road if you...
Weighbridge issue, if there's a vehicle going, because we haven't got one Weighbridge, a vehicle has to come back the other way, it stops everybody while that vehicle goes.
So that's situation normal, traffic back
It doesn't happen often, but at Christmas time we have banked up traffic. With the one-way bridge, if we get a series of large trucks go through and they have to all come back over the incoming weighbridge, it delays a lot of traffic and that can cause banking out onto Yamundi Road. And it's really dangerous.
Sorry, some of the other reasons that we've experienced when obviously the initial COVID-19 response phase came in, people have got that more opportunity to be at home, they're not at work, they're not doing other things, so that was driving additional business. But the slowdown was also because we had to put in place much stricter measures in terms of, for example, cash handling, sort etc. So that was slowing things down. So it's a combination of factors that's then causing more people at the landfill and a much slower processing time to get them through out the other side.
Well, the transfer stations at Karoy Pomona are far smaller in capacity and only open for limited hours. Do we have any issues with banking up there on those mornings? Or?
No. The volume of traffic is quite small at those facilities. We only get a few transactions an hour on average, and that's why we have very limited hours.
That's it from me.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you, Wayne.
Anything else you can go? I'll move that.
Thank you. I'll second.
Thank you, Claire. All in favour?
Thanks, Wayne.
Thanks,
Thank
Wayne.
you, Wayne.
Thanks, Kerry.
Kerry's for the next
Oh,
one.
she's on the next one.
The next one.
Item 7, Community Services Department update.
Yeah, Kerry, an update on the progress of the Pritchard Community House, please.
Yes, thank you, Frank.
Hang on a moment, Kerry, you've gone all funny.
The Daleks.
Sorry, this is as good as I've got, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
It's gone all,
It's gone all Doctor Who-ish.
Yeah, you've gone Dalek-ish on us.
just mute and unmute again, maybe.
Okay, hang on. How's that?
No.
Technology is great until it
Do you
doesn't
want to,
work.
Go right out and come back in, perhaps?
Yep, hang on.
Yeah, we'll be with you.
This might be internet.
That's not the first time that's happened in all the meetings we've been holding along. App issues, or maybe a reboot in some other way, shape or form. Just for the new councillors, there's an indication of the amount of work that our departments do through the period of a year and the number of projects, a department the size of Kerry's has got on board across the range of services they deliver.
Here she comes. Try it again, Kerry.
I'm back.
That's much better.
Out here in Pomona skills, takes a while for the little packages to work their way through. Sorry, folks.
I've heard of gremlins getting in the system, but never Daleks.
So, Kerry, the question was about the Rufus Street project and where we're up to there.
Yeah, so thank you. So we have rescoped that project and have worked our way through the legal requirements for liquidation. We're working our way through those. They obviously haven't completed yet, but it has put us in a position in being able to go back and undertake the quotation process to complete the design documentation. That process has been complete, and we have now engaged architects to complete the design. So that work was pretty much 90% complete anyway, so there's a piece of work to do there. And the changed project plan is then to go out to tender for construction only, rather than the design construct program that we had previously. So we will complete that body of work over the next 8 weeks, the design work, and then go out to tender for construction of the community house and a revised landscaping plan.
How has the liquidation affected the budget for this project?
That it remains to be seen, Frank. Very much will depend on going out to tender again and what the tender price comes in at. We have built in options to that new tender to enable us to scale the project back if we need to. And that scaling, however, wouldn't fundamentally alter the functional purpose of the building, but may delay some components of the building to future years if needed to keep the project within budget.
Kerry, can I ask a couple of questions? And probably one that, you know, I need some clarification on. What's council done to put in place, or what minimum financial requirements have council put in place to ensure that we don't have a repeat of the RICON situation? Are we asking for PBAs to provide payment security for work that we tender?
So I guess obviously with the RICON, we have gone through and done a review of processes, and they're looking now at what measures would be appropriate to put in place for future tenders, and working closely with the state government on some of the measures that they have proposed and are in trial. They've identified a range of issues with some of those measures. So we're looking at what additional measures we would put in place. And some of that work obviously will be implemented as part of the next tender for Rufus Street.
Project bank accounts, PBAs, that's been used in a lot of tender processes, I think, with the state, with projects between $1 and $10 million, and used also for commercial tenders. Is that something that council has looked into?
We certainly have looked into that, Amelia, and it is something that is being trialled at a state level but not required at local government. It has some absolute benefits, but also there have been some issues raised with it. So one of those issues that's been raised, for example, is that the requirements for those project bank accounts might be such that the tender may then only be of interest from a large contractor, and may say, for example, a national contractor that works across the country, and may therefore or not be open to some of our smaller local contractors. And so that's the issue that the state is and local governments are looking at, is what is the balance that can be achieved that provides a greater level of surety or confidence, but ensures that tenders are open to the broad range of contractors out there.
Okay.
The other issue that has been raised is that the way that the project bank accounts are operating at the moment is that they would provide a level of confidence to tier 1 subcontractors, which are the largest contractors, but not the next levels down. So while they on the face of it provide some benefits, there's a lot more work that needs to be done to determine whether they actually will provide the security that particularly our smaller subcontractors are seeking.
Yeah, my understanding, Kerry, is both the state and the LGAQ are working, well, the state in particular are working on a series of methodologies and trialling things like the bank accounts, contract bank accounts, but the LGAQ are also pursuing this because we're not the only council in this in this vicinity. Am I right there, Brett?
Oh, even with this particular contract, there were 3 councils. But yeah, it's an issue right across the state, and not just in the local government sector.
So it's
a challenge.
Something that I would like, Kerry, for you guys to consider, we're at concept stage, 8 more weeks before we go into construction.
Sorry, what was that, Amelia?
Okay, Kerry, I'd just like you to consider when council appoints a new builder, I think we should ask whether they're willing to engage the subcontractors who were working on the original job and give them an opportunity, provided they provide value for money, give them an opportunity to work on the job again. I think there's been a lot of subcontractors that were badly done by who've lost a lot of money, and I just think it's a goodwill exercise, given the COVID-19 situation we're in, to ask the new builder to engage the original subcontractors.
One of the challenges with that, of course, is that when we go to tender, we might get 5 or 6 different builders who lodge. They all have their own contractors they use all the time.
Yep.
It'd be very difficult for us to go to the market and say you must only use or you should use these particular ones, because that means that they're all going to use. Well, they don't have their normal arrangements in place. So.
It also becomes a liability for council that if the work isn't up to the standard that we anticipate, and we turn around to the head contractor and say that work isn't good enough, they say, sorry, you told us to use this subcontractor. So there are other implications with going down that path.
It'd be a good thing if it happened though.
And absolutely, and different builders have different parameters around their subcontractors as well. I mean, you know, sort of elements of which contractor undertakes what element of the work.
It certainly built into our tender process, and it will be looking at what the local economic benefit is. So that's a really important part of our capital works projects and tendering process. And so while it may not be directly related to a subcontractor from previously, there will be benefit to local contractors.
Is there an opportunity to change the weighting with regard to this contract on local content?
We always review the weighting methodology for each tender, and we would be doing the same to get a methodology that produces the best community and financial outcome for the project.
Which includes local.
Kerry, I've got a question.
Sorry, Amelia, we finished?
No, I think you answered my question in regards to the local content criteria. Thanks, Kerry.
All right, sorry.
Thank you.
No, Kerry, you said that you're looking at sort of a review of the processes and what measures can be put in place for future tenders to ensure that what happened with RICON doesn't happen again, and that some of those sort of protocols will be implemented in regard to this project. So my question,
we in council are looking at the measures that we can implement. So we would look at what we can implement as part of the roofer strip, but the overall issue of contract stability and their financial viability is an issue for local government as a whole, and the measures that we implement. So we obviously have had fairly stringent measures in the past, but still there are situations when unfortunately a contractor manages, through all of that assessment to come through and score very highly, but in the end has unfortunately gone into liquidation.
Yes.
So we will be taking some of those learnings on board that we can for the next contract. Obviously, we do not want a situation where we have similar problems. We are confident, though, that because this is one of the reasons why we are looking at a construct-only tender this time. It reduces a lot of the risks because we're just dealing with basically the major contractor and then the trades to support that, rather than the previous contract, which was design and construct, so a lot more complex with a lot more risk.
Yeah. My question, I think, at the end of all that was with looking at these new processes, is there a time frame around that this will be implemented within, say, 6 months, 12 months? Do we have a time frame on that, or is that just a work in progress?
It's a work in progress, and it's really more of a question for Carl's area in terms of and procurement.
I was going to say procurement. Thank you, Karen.
Okay.
Just one other thing on this. Recently we had, through the audit committee, actually done an internal review of our contract management. Internal auditors came and had a look at that. One of their recommendations is to build in some better process or more processes in terms of the financial capacity of a successful tenderer, to have a look at that and build that into our processes. So that's one of the other things we're doing at the moment.
Right. Do we actually have a dollar value on how much we lost with the failure of RICON? Is that a question for you, Carl? No. Brett?
I couldn't do that off the top of my head. We can take that on notice. The staff who are dealing with that, you're talking about council's loss?
Actually, yeah.
Yeah, not the subcontractors.
Just
We wouldn't know that,
total
it's
loss.
just council.
It was a $5.2 million contract. They went into liquidation owing $3.6 million. We've got, I think, $250,000 that
so
subbies owing money. But where do we sit in all that?
We can have a look at getting that.
Yeah, that would be
information. I
great.
don't have that at the moment.
Okay.
Would that be something we can assess until we've got a new contract in place for the new building?
I'm not too sure.
That's correct. Until we go out to tender,
We wouldn't know what the
loss is.
when we wouldn't, we don't have a clear picture there.
We
It
don't know
may
what
well
the
be
difference between the next
project actually comes in on budget.
So for argument's sake, we'll just use some round numbers. Imagine, we had a price originally of $4 million, whatever, and now we have to go back again. It comes in at 4.2 million. Part of our loss will actually be that 200,000 additional cost, as well as where we might have burned on the way through.
Yeah,
So
it'd be good to have that number.
Yeah,
Brett.
and until we get that next tender in, we won't know that number.
Yeah, until the tender's gone out and we get that completed, we won't know the difference in the two contracts. So there's no way of knowing the dollar value until that's complete.
Yeah.
Or until the project's complete, to see if the project actually comes in on budget as well.
There'd be no problem incorporating that, because the final decision will have to come back to council in terms of that tender. Will be a large one, so we can incorporate that at that stage.
Okay, holding cost, is that factored into that number as well?
Yeah, we don't have a holding cost normally compared to the private sector, which would have, interest on loans and things like that. We don't own, we own the site outright, so it's not that same type of thing.
Okay.
Sorry, Kerry, just while we're still on the Parisian site, going down to libraries in your report, research possible location of potential library kiosk in Pomona and Parisian is one of the things being considered in that Parisian community building restructure, an element of looking at whether the library kiosk could be housed within?
So yes, as part of the options for replacement of the existing mobile library, kiosks or vending machines is one of the options being considered for some locations. And Parisian has been identified as the location which would suit a kiosk, given the high volumes of loans there and the difficulty of getting vehicles into that area. So it is one of the options that would be suitable for Parisian.
Yeah, it wasn't the question I asked. I mean, within the design of the building as it stands, or going forward, is that something that's been thought about to incorporate within the design, or within the space?
Sorry, Joe. I'm sorry. It's hard to hear you. It is being incorporated into the planning.
Yeah.
As an option to either go ahead or not go ahead. So with the kiosks, they can either go within a building or external to a building, and then so therefore not impact on the design whatsoever.
Okay.
So at the moment, the design accounts for either having a kiosk there or not. If it is not a kiosk there because we don't proceed with that option, then that just opens up a little bit more internal space for the building.
You've answered the question. I just that it had been thought about as a possibility within the space.
Yes, it has.
Thank you.
And it's in terms of it can either proceed or not proceed depending on the decision making that council comes to.
Brilliant. That's the answer I was seeking. Thank you. Anybody else got any further questions? I've got a couple more, Kerry, if I may. The leisure centre and aquatic centre and those, the J and the like, whilst there's going to be a financial impact there, I'm assuming the possibility of less expense despite less revenue may result in a better net result. Is that something that looks like it may come up in the figures?
No. To be blunt, no. So for example, if you take the aquatic centre, even though the centre may not be open, we're still, we haven't emptied the pools. So the pools are still operating, the water is still being filtered, there's still electricity, pumped. So, and we still have the salaries of the permanent staff to fund.
But not the casual staff.
No, not the, well, in some respect, we're still funding the casual staff because they were eligible for pandemic leave.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Kerry, this is just something that I'm a little bit passionate about, the youth in our community. I note with all your grant giving and stuff, you always mention the importance to activate community and social inclusion as part of your goals. And I love seeing projects such as sporting club infrastructure projects and your skateboarding initiatives. I just want to take the opportunity to reinforce how important the youth are to our future, and we should just continue to explore opportunities to support youth organisations with either external or internal grant applications.
Thanks, Amelia.
Claire, I think you were going to ask about the bushfire funding one too.
I was going to ask about bushfire, but just while we're on Leisure Centre and the napkins like that. But my question, Kerry, was because we've been, I guess, cooped up for so long and the public are dying to get out there, do we have a strategy to manage sort of the community expectation of when we can reopen these facilities and how we reopen them? Because it's going to be difficult, because there's going to be that expectation that if we can open them, they should be open.
And 10 people.
Yeah.
It's a really good question, Claire. From a public perspective, they've heard the announcement that libraries, schools, community centres can, reopen from Saturday. What the community probably don't see are that there's a whole lot of restrictions around that. For example, at the aquatic centre, you can have 10 patrons at a time. All they're allowed to do is swim lanes. There can be no people standing around the edge, etc. So. And those restrictions haven't been fully released yet. So we're awaiting further information from the Queensland Government and Queensland Health around that. And Noosa Council, along with many other councils, have submitted information requests to Queensland Health to help us understand exactly what our obligations are in terms of health, hygiene and other public health measures. So that we can understand how we can operate. So it's our plan will be a gradual reopening that provides services and facilities in a safe and healthy manner. And as soon as we understand exactly what's required of us in terms of conditions, we'll be able to incorporate that into our planning. But we can expect that it will be a gradual recommencement of services. So, for example, with the libraries, we won't be, for example, opening the doors on Saturday. If we did that, we would have many more than 10 people trying to come into the door. And what we don't want is a situation where we've got long queues of people who aren't appropriately distanced, who are getting very frustrated because they're unable to come in. So instead, what we would be looking at is a more tailored service, so what we would call, for example, a click and collect service, so that it enables people to reserve an item online. They will get a notification when that item has arrived, and they'll be able to drive up to the library and collect that item. So while it's great that the community's enthusiastic, we need to make sure that we temper that enthusiasm and maintain the really good work that the community has done in staying healthy through measures that support.
Thanks, Kerry. Thank you. And I just wanted to have a quick chat about the fire grant from the federal government, the 1.25 million.
So the Category D, yep, Category D bushfire funding.
Yeah.
So we are working through a process to allocate that funding to projects. Some of it is quite simple and is proceeding. So, for example, additional fire hazard management with the addition of, I think, 4 extra burns, provided that we get the right environmental conditions to be able to proceed with that. Hazard management plans, community education, particularly around quick evacuation. So when we did our community consultation around this, we found that 30% of our community did not feel confident in being able to evacuate quickly. You know, they felt confident if it was, for example, a flood, that they would know what to do, but not in terms of a speedy bushfire where they would have to leave quickly. So we're working with Queensland Fire Emergency Services around a community education program for that. Some of the other work that is underway is some works to our evacuation centres, and in being able to increase our ability, for example, to have people sleep overnight without having to bring in bedding, for example, from Sunshine Coast or Brisbane, because that was a significant issue to us last time. So we would have that new facilities in place by the next fire season.
Right. Thanks, Kerry. That's all I had. Thank you.
Kerry got to answer all your questions.
I know.
Oh, Kerry, still on the Bushfire Recovery Fund. Just one last question. The community was actually invited to list projects and initiatives to be included in the Capital Works program. Just wanted to know whether these projects and initiatives have been that were identified by the community were in fact included on the list, and will these projects be available for public viewing?
So when we did the community consultation for the Category D funding, and there was a wide range of ideas put forward, and then those ideas were workshopped by a forum that had more community stakeholder engagement. And so a number of those items have indeed informed the spending of that Category D funding. So, for example, that preparing quick evacuation plans was one of the highest priority items for them. Hazard management was another one that was a high priority for them, and so they have been included. Some of the others, for example, ideas like some community infrastructure, say for example, barbecue and picnic tables at Lake Koloiba. So that was one of the ideas that came through. So we would now work with the community to say, what would this look like? Is this something that that you particularly want? Because that was an idea that actually came up from people outside of the community. So that's what we would work on. In terms of, will the projects be put up for the community to vote on? I'm not sure whether that was your question beforehand.
Yeah, just so
no, we would undergo community consultation with the particular relevant stakeholders.
Okay. Thank you, Kerry.
And as yet, so the final list hasn't been drawn up, Kerry, or ratified at this stage.
So there won't be, I guess, a final list as such, because we are proceeding with some of those projects now. And what we will do is, on, say, for example, a quarterly basis, bring an update back to council to let you know where we're at in that. So at the moment, we have just simply started scoping out some of those and started doing some spend around small things that are more operational.
So who gets the final sign-off on which projects do and don't get up?
That would be the recovery team.
Would that have been in accordance with the council allocation within the different groups back in February or January, whatever it was? Okay.
Yes,
so
it's in line with the report that went up in March, and the allocations that were made there. If there, for example, was a new project that came up that we felt warranted a change to that allocation, then we would come back to council and have that discussion.
So the division of the 1.275 million has been assessed and approved by council, and the individual projects within each of those areas will be decided within the recovery team.
That's correct.
Kerry, I was going to ask, with those 4 burns that are planned, will we get notice about if and when they're going ahead?
Always.
Absolutely. So that's 4 additional birds.
Yeah.
So you will, council and the community will be notified, and our hope is that we have a good full season and are able to get through those.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I keep saying one last question, and I have 100 more questions. Kerry, in regards to high priority hazard areas, did you factor in some areas might not be recognised with our fire hazard mapping as high risk? However, have you factored in sort of social risk and psychological risk? There are communities that need some fuel loads addressed, and council may not necessarily recognise them as high priority risk areas, but these communities need it for peace of mind and sleep at night. Have you factored those sort of things in when you have big communities asking you to address areas which, again, council may not recognise as high priority, but they do?
Noosa Banks is a good one, I think.
So
Links Drive in Noosa Springs, the Oasis, is probably the one that I'm really quite concerned with, because we have some big communities out there that really want.
My parents live there. I have to leave.
Kerry might refer that one to Carl.
Hold on, I've got Carl. Sorry, Kerry. Yeah.
So,
I have to leave
at the moment, there is a report that was prepared by the Oasis community.
Yep.
We met for 3 hours with the Oasis community, with police, QFES, National Parks and Wildlife Service as well. And we had their maintenance manager happen to be driving by, and he stopped in and joined us as well. And he said, this needs to be discussed with all of the body corporates that are in the that area, Noosa Springs area, not just Oasis in isolation. So they've got some internal work to do themselves on this, because some of the things they were asking for might not be wanted by other parts of that community. So in terms of, we want to clean out the vegetation and remove vegetation along the Links Drive and so on. So that's going to impact on others' amenity as well. So I understand there are certain people within Oasis that are concerned by this, but we have to look at that broader community. Now, so we did answer a lot of their questions, and we have passed on their report through the LDMG. That has gone to QFES, and they will be responding to the particular questions there. There isn't a lot of work that is that council can do in this situation. So their internal maintenance crews look after Links Drive, and the adjacent area is controlled by Parks and Wildlife. Now they have got a burn plan there shortly, and that is the missing portion out of all of this. So the rest of it was all done last year, either by the Perigian fire or by a controlled burn that they had done prior to that, which was on the eastern shoreline of the Lake Wyber. So the next little portion is behind, going basically from that section that was burned and across through there. So that has been planned by Parks and Wildlife in the next month or so.
Yep.
I know that they haven't been able, they're postponed most burns that were due to occur this week because of the rain. It's just too wet underfoot, and they can't get the fire started. And they've also got to wait for the wind to be in the right direction from that area.
Sure.
Now, in terms of the psychological side of things, I'll leave that up to QFES to respond on that. But I'll take that on board. I understand that there's also a lot of people in the community that are
totally. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I can comment on that. Yeah.
Yep.
So you're absolutely right that there's different elements to risk and how people perceive risk, and whether it's an actual physical risk or a risk to them psychologically, or that's the impact that they're currently feeling. So at the moment, we are in the human social side of recovery, working with the education side of QFES around how we build in those support mechanisms and education mechanisms to help people overcome their feeling of anxiety.
And improve their resilience.
And that's exactly right. So that's a key component of this recovery work, in being able to give people the confidence that they can cope if there was a situation. Because simply dealing with, say, for example, a physical hazard isn't necessarily going to deal with their feeling of anxiety and concern should something occur. So we handle it on a number of levels, both physical in terms of the environment, but also working with those communities around things like how you support your neighbour, what is your project, a neighbourhood safer place. All of those types of things give people a sense of much greater confidence that they would be okay if a fire came towards their community.
Thank you, Kerry.
And it importantly puts the sense of control back to them. One of the big reasons that people feel highly anxious in this is that they feel that their control's been ripped away from them, that this fire just takes over their lives, and they're helpless in the face of it. What we want to do is build in skills and knowledge for people to say, it's okay, you do have a sense of control in this, and these are the tools that we'll give you to give you that sense of confidence.
Empower them to know what actions they can undertake in the event that something is coming their way.
Absolutely. And those neighbourhood working groups are really powerful in that space.
In regards to the Links Drive Oasis situation, I think when the body corporates approached council some time ago, the reason that was given by council was that we didn't actually have the resources, we didn't have the money to go ahead with this fuel reduction. There is an opportunity now. We have got the resources.
So we don't do the maintenance along that Links Drive. That's handled by their internal.
So that's the issue.
Yeah. So, but we don't have a budget at that. So at the time, we don't have a budget to do any of those works.
Okay.
So, so has that changed with this? Possibly
Funding,
with this
yes.
funding.
Yep.
So, but
So council is responsible then for that, Carl, if we had the budget for it.
it has been maintained historically. There's an agreement in place with their maintenance contractor on site to look after that for them. So part of they've got it's a gated community, and so what happens is they've got a maintenance team which handles all of the maintenance inside that. So we don't do any of that maintenance in that area. So they need to discuss it with the other body corporates that are there, come to an agreement on what is acceptable in terms of the fuel load, and then they can deal with that. So the other body corporates
so
might
the onus
say,
is on them, is what you're saying.
yeah, and that's what we told.
It's not a council responsibility.
And that's what we told them on the day. We said, you've got to go back and discuss this, and that's what their maintenance manager said as well. He said, you've got to discuss this with the other body corporates. You can't make unilateral decisions on this.
But when we're talking human lives and fire hazards, do we really start saying, well, this is your domain, this is our domain? Surely community
we can
is
advocate
community, no
for
gates.
it. We can advocate for that. But that area is within their area to maintain, and then the adjacent area is controlled by Parks and Wildlife. We can
But
advocate
they still
for
pay
that.
rates, don't they, Carl?
We can't go into private
Yes.
who works on
Yeah,
private
my
land
parents
down
live in the
to
Oasis.
body corporates.
I know it pretty
Yeah.
well. My parents live there in the Oasis. So it's a gated community that there is Links Drive, but the gate starts at the entrance to the Oasis, which has 27 houses, and then across the Springs, Noosa Springs is about 100 and something houses, and that's separate. Now there's a body corporate to the Oasis. I'm not sure about in regard to how many other body corporates there are.
Well, you've got the resort. You've got a new development up on the hill with the resort.
Park
as well,
Ridge, there was some concern with
four
access.
or five.
There was concern with access for them too because of Park Ridge and not being able to get out if it came to it, because of the increased traffic. That was an issue as well.
I just think community is community, Carl.
Yeah, I know, but we're also worried about the rest of the community as well, for the whole of Noosa.
Totally, yeah.
So we've got a finite amount of money, and we've got a lot of people out there that are at
far higher risk, and that was discussed with them by Ben Carroll from QPS, because they've got that golf course there with dams, and they've got or little lakes in there, and they've got the lake adjacent. So they actually have got a place that they could be evacuated to by QPS and QFES. So, but there are other people out there in the hinterland. So I think we've got to balance that in terms of the risk, and that's what we want to do this review of, is have a look at the basic, the whole area, look at the fuel loads, where we've had fires, where people are at high risk, take into account all of those considerations. And we've got the QFES team that they handle this. This is their specialty. We're going to bring them in and have a look at that, and then prioritise, like we do with all of the other work that we've got through the council, through the Shire, prioritise which areas we're going to address and where we're going to target the communities that are most at risk and assist them with trying to develop their own evacuation plans. There is
yeah.
So there is. I understand their concern. So, but there's a lot of other areas that are at far higher risk around the Shire, and we're going to have to prioritise that. We've got to take a strategic view of this.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what came out of that meeting with QFES and QPWS and QFES with the Oasis Body Corporate on site that day was that they acknowledged that they were concerned.
Yep.
There were that links drive itself wasn't a high risk area, but the surrounding QPWS areas were, and so that's why they've scheduled burns there.
They were already scheduled. So a lot of these are scheduled, in advance. We all have a look at our different areas, and that's what Cool Burn is about. It's about looking at where are our risk areas. So
I understand that the Oasis chairman is meeting with QFES in the coming weeks as well. To discuss it further.
Philip.
Yeah, I had an email from him.
Yeah.
Councillors, I'm a little concerned that we've sort of gone off topic here. We're talking about the Community Services Department update, not specific,
could I go to
specific elements within. Can we get
page 71?
Exhausted that for the moment.
The local laws compliance, 837 customer requests. I compared it to the last quarter, which we had 1,208 customer requests. That's like a 33% drop off in requests. What do you attribute that to, Kerry? Is it just COVID?
Yeah, a lot of it is, Frank. Interestingly, we went through a period where there was a drop in requests, but of late, which I guess is post this data, the requests have actually gone up, which is interesting. It's almost like people went through a period where they just, things calmed down, people were just at home, focused on what they were doing at home. But now the requests have gone up as people have got, for example, agitated with the dog that's barking down the street. They've had enough of that now. They've been at home 8 weeks. And once again, now that people are starting to move out and about in the community, the requests are going back up again as we've got dogs off lead and things like that.
There were less barking dogs in the beginning because everybody was home exhausting their dogs by walking them, and now the dogs are barking.
Yeah. And I think also, Joe, because a number of barking dog complaints come because a dog has been left alone all day.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
It's simply, it's bored dog and it's barking. With more people at home, there's been less incidents of that, which is interesting.
So, Kerry, in the December quarter report, you said the new barking dog process has been initiated. What's been the result of that? Is that how has that affected?
So that puts.
Is that part of the picture here? That's why you're getting fewer customer requests, because the barking dog process was initiated and has been successful.
That's more about how we deal with it when the request comes in, and the process that it moves through, which helps a customer understand what their role is in it and what constitutes a barking dog, etc. So it has helped with, once the request comes in actually bringing that to a more satisfactory resolution.
Okay.
And it clearly outlines as well, it's not enough simply to complain to council about a dog barking, that there will be an onus on the person making the complaint to provide factual information to support that.
Yeah.
On page 77, just quickly, shelter renewal program, Kerry. Does that mean bus shelter canopies for hinterland
You're
areas?
going into infrastructure.
I'm going. Sorry, Kerry.
Oh, look,
next
Wrong
department's
department.
report.
Sorry. I'm speeding this up too much. Sorry, Kerry.
Unless there's any more, so I'll move this one.
I've got one last question. If there's nobody else has got another question with regard to this. Kerry, deliver capital works and facilities projects. I notice there's a draft capital works brief for a new fire system at Karoi. I'm assuming that's the Karoi Library in response to ongoing issues with current system and significant reactive maintenance costs. I would have thought the Karoi, it is the Karoi Library we're talking about.
Sorry, Joe, I'm unable to hear you. Something about Karoi Library?
On page 70, the email I sent you with regard to the draft capital works brief for the new fire system. Can you hear me?
Barely.
If you
Hang on, the fire system.
Yep. Is that
yes, so
does that relate to the library?
I think that it does. I'll have to get back to you on that. I'm not sure whether it's just the library or whether it's the butter factory as well.
Okay. Well, I sent you an email on that and I haven't received a response, so I thought I'd bring it up again. If you can get back to me on that with regard to which fire system we're talking about, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's the last question from me.
Kerry, I just wanted to say thank you to you and Alison and the whole team. I mean, you've got 300 community groups that you're looking after in unprecedented times, and you guys, I see it every week in the local disaster management group. You're doing a tremendous job, so thank you very much.
Not only 300 community groups, but
plus all the other, exactly.
All those people that are
and
displaced.
Managing COVID and
and the bushfire.
Correct. So you guys are doing a stellar job.
And barking dogs.
Thank you.
Well done, Kerry.
I'll pass that on to the team.
Sorry, Councillor Wilkie, you wanted to move it. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Lauriston, all in favour? Thank you. Move on. Thanks, Kerry. We'll move on to one
Kerry.
infrastructure services department update. Carl. Any questions for Carl?
Just looking for the unmute button under here.
I got a funny feeling Councillor Lauriston's got a question.
A few more pages here for you. I'll start page 77, the shelter renewal project. Does that include bus shelter canopies for hinterland areas, including Pomona?
Yes, it does.
Fantastic.
That's awesome.
To clarify, there's something like 21 or 22 bus shelters left remaining to be...
Oh, not even that. Yeah, so we've got, I think we're
small,
down to about,
I
think we've got some starting in the next week, and then we've got probably, I think it's 11 more to do next financial year. So we haven't got a lot left. The thing is though, so that's for the DDA compliance. So the next step is that there is an upgrade program coming through with funding from the state, and that is looking at upgrading and putting shelters on bus stops that have just got a seat or haven't got anything at all. They're just a concrete. So we're going to. That's probably the ongoing work that you're going to see rolling out ahead of that.
So bus shelter canopies for Pomona. How about footpaths and crossings to get to the bus shelters? Has that been prioritised as well? I noticed a footpath review in the report.
Yep. Okay. So there is a portion of path that was included. That was paid for by council, so the DDA compliant bus stops doesn't include that, and that linked up to the footpath that was put across the by Queensland Rail across their land. It comes up to the side of the TMR controlled road. We do not put in infrastructure across TMR assets. That's up to them to do. So we have addressed the local resident who is raising that issue and told them they've got to discuss that with TMR when they're going to organise that portion of work. If they're going to organise that portion of work, that's up to TMR to handle. But there's no other work to provide further linkages at the moment in the program of works.
Given the TMR control both areas of that state land, it's interesting that one hand isn't talking to the other within the organisation.
Couldn't comment on that, I'm afraid, Chair.
But I can.
Carl, the Noosa Bank shelter renewal, what's that specifically?
They were the ones that were burnt down during the...
They're in that area.
Yeah, so, but they were already fairly dilapidated, so I believe we're relocating those to a different, I haven't visited those, you've visited those,
so
haven't
that's
you?
when you're going down towards that boat or canoe launching area in the back there, those ones on the right, so, yeah.
Any chance to do some clearing there? Because those, I recorded to those houses a lot. And
So-
with the concern that they just wanted some mowed.
Yeah, so they're poorly located. They were put in by the developer, and it was obviously to meet a requirement. But it's really, from what I understand, they're not well located, and we might be looking at relocating them to a less mozzie-prone area. So
No,
I'm
just
not.
mowing.
My understanding, we've put one back there, and we're looking at relocating a second one to to a better location that doesn't have the problems that location had, where there were 3 previously.
But in that
I'll
area,
look at that. I'll look at the mowing. I'll look at slashing.
Around,
Thank you. Thanks.
around
just
Noosa
straight
banks in
from,
general.
correct.
Because they were also situated in one area, so everybody had to congregate to the one area.
Yeah.
My understanding is staff are looking at whether they can be situated elsewhere around Noosa banks.
But the Noosa Banks people are concerned because they've got a lot of scrub growing, and they just want it, and it's not council, it's not their land, so they can't actually.
There's an element of it. There's an element of that. It's also QPWS.
That's what I'm worrying about. So I don't know whether we're actually able to do it.
I raised that
So
with staff the other day to talk and to see whether QPWS, and I actually raised it with John. I think at LDNG with regard to not being maintained down there.
Yeah, it's been a concern for a few of them. Thanks, Carl.
no worries.
On page 78, there's reference to branch reviews. Wasn't there a review of the civil ops branch?
We have got a draft of that. Unfortunately, we were overtaken by COVID, so we haven't been able to go much further with that at the moment. We are going to be bringing in, or we're looking at bringing in consultants to facilitate that process. We are looking at certain aspects of it. There were some low-hanging fruit that we are investigating further, and one of those is the possibility of working closer with Gympie Shire Council and possibly dry hiring a grader from them. So we're having discussions on that tomorrow. So they're ongoing at the moment.
Yeah, so it was conducted by an independent consultant.
Correct, yes.
So what were the major findings in terms of what's the department doing well and what can be improved on?
That's a very long one.
So it was mainly the civil operations branch, the outdoor staff.
Yeah.
I'm having a look at what's best practice, what can be done better in terms of scheduling of jobs, how they operate, some of the structure issues, some of the issues around utilisation of plant equipment, things like that. So it's very operational based to look at how it can be run better.
The other thing as well it looked at was the connection and the tie together with asset planning and asset management, and how we need to look at how we could possibly speed up the process of getting asset management down to a more granular level. So at the moment it's at a high level. You might recall when we had a look at those asset management plans, fairly high level. So they look at a building, they don't look, or they look at a road. They don't necessarily look at the smaller detail, like how many pits we've got, how much curb and channel we've got that needs to be repaired. And then what we need to do is, once we've got that information, develop maintenance plans and schedules that utilise that information so that we have a more efficient system and we aren't we're doing more proactive work rather than reactive work, and we can put that into our future budgets. So that was probably the core area, and that's really just a function of being on that journey with the asset management plans and getting them to a point where we can then develop the maintenance plans so that we can do the work more effectively.
Will there be any cost-saving measures coming before us to consider as part of the budget?
Part of the budget, not at this stage. There might be a few things.
We're looking to.
Yeah, well,
every penny counts.
Oh, definitely, yeah. So we've definitely gone through in my area. We've gone through a lot, found savings for COVID. So like all the departments have. So we are definitely putting those forward. So it's.
Yeah. Is this an operational level document, or will councillors get to see that?
It's really operational in terms of what they're doing every day, how they can improve that.
Yes.
That's what we always try and look at different areas to see how they can improve.
Yeah.
And then what do we do about it? So we had the report just before the COVID stuff hit, so we haven't done too much about it yet.
Yeah.
So myself and Carl and the management team will start to look at what we can change and improve.
So just so I understand what you're talking about, more proactive scheduling of work. That means that the crews out and about on the road will have their work cut out for them in a more systematic way.
That's right.
So not necessarily waiting for jobs and jobs are being reactive.
It's also going to help with the
rolling
supervisors
program
in dealing that
keep
work
them better
out.
occupied.
Not better occupied. It's the supervisors at the moment are having to get the complaint in or the CRM in and have a look at it and go, yes, okay, that needs doing, and then handing that on. We could be simplifying that system and having it go that it goes straight from CRM to a work team's tablet, and they literally just go out and deal with the job.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's right. So it's about finding those efficiencies in the system, stemming from the asset management side of things.
And maturity in the organisation as such.
Definitely.
We've spoken about with regard to, say, like various where the bus stops were being implemented, but the pathways adjoining them weren't being considered at the same time. There's an opportunity there while we're there to
better inspection regimes for, so like we might have somebody go out and look at the bus stop, you're right, and somebody else will be going around looking at footpaths, and somebody else is going around fixing potholes. But when they're driving past, if they see there's an issue there, they can put that into the system and say, okay, that needs to be scheduled to be done. Rather than waiting for somebody who's, so if you see a pothole in the road,
part of the job description, for example, to be mindful of these other things.
Yeah, that's
It's not their specific.
Yeah, that's right. We're servicing the public. We're not fixing just potholes. My job is not to fix a pothole. My job is to service the public and the community and the local residents. The way I go about that is fixing that pothole, but also picking up that there are other things around it, that there's some graffiti there, and that someone needs to come back and clean that.
Yeah.
Carl, on the strategic tree management plan, I've had a few people contact me about the trees along Any Creek Road. They're a bit worried about them. Sort of, if there's a storm, they'll hit the road, they can knock over. Is there someone who can, is that part of the plan? Is to have people go out and look at these things?
So part of that was that we would get the arborist to go out and do a thorough review of maybe not every tree, but in certain areas we have done that. So we have now got GPS coordinates for every single tree along the Gympie foreshore. Yeah. So what happens, the arborist goes along and does that review of them. And then rather than saying, okay, we've got to do these immediately, and getting a contractor to come out and chop down that tree there or trim this tree around, so that we improve the lighting levels at the roundabout, what we do is we say, we're going to bundle these all up into a body of work, and we're going to put this into the budget for next year, so that what we can do is get some savings there by getting the contractors working in one area rather than going to a job down at Pomona, a job up at out at Koran, and then one down at Tewantin. So, and we've found already we're getting about a 10 to 15% saving on those. So, which is great news.
And the person who assesses the arborist, are they internal here or are they an external assessor?
We've got a full-time arborist on staff here, although we do have contractors that can come in to assist with that. So there's 2 people in our arborist team at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Page 86, in regards to the electric buses, I'm excited at our future, but I question whether the timing is right. And
sorry, what was that?
Page 86.
Yes.
We the next quarter collaborate with Kinetic to develop electric bus proposal, including electric bus depot.
Yep.
Will the community also be provided with the costs of the charging infrastructure, and will the community also be provided with the cost benefits of electric charging, because we really will need to be able to sell this to the community?
Yeah, okay. This is a fairly complex one because we don't run the bus service. We don't run any bus services here. So it's run by TransLink, and they have a contractor, which is Sunbus, that runs that service for them. Sunbus is going to, or Kinetic, which they've just been bought out, are going back to TransLink and saying, we believe we can run this, the services here in Noosa more efficiently and more effectively. So then it's up to them to build that business case for that. We are definitely advocating for it, but that's really all our role is in this. So we won't be putting in additional charging stations, there won't be a cost to ratepayers for that. We might do some in-kind work. So the problem with the electric buses, they don't have, it's the dead running time. So they're coming all the way up, the buses are diesel buses, coming all the way up from the Sunshine Coast from their depot down there to work in Noosa. Now, if we were to set up an electric bus fleet, it really revolves around having a local depot. And so what we might do is to facilitate that, we might provide assistance in kind. So we might, for example, do some asphalting work on the site so that they don't have to pay for that. So, yep, these are things that we're investigating where we can actually just help things move along, so it just sweetens that deal a little bit more for both Sunbus and TransLink to be able to go, yep, we think that's a good idea, we're going to proceed with that.
Great, excited.
Yep, no, it's a great idea. Yeah.
We've been investigating the possibility of electric buses in the local region, how we facilitate those. At the same time, it'd be nice to see it finally come to fruition in some way.
Yeah, definitely.
Anything further, Ian? Frank?
Place design has completed first pass concept design for the northeastern corner of the junction on page 80. Is that for the link between Noosa Junction and Hastings Street, Carl?
Sorry, can you just repeat that
Page
for me?
80.
Yep.
Recent achievements, bottom panel. A planner has been engaged for project planning from Noosa Junction to Noosa Drive and the Hastings Street precinct. Place design has completed first pass concept design for the northeastern corner of the junction. So that's where the walk begins or terminates. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. Yep.
Can you just explain what's envisaged? It's a walking link?
Yeah, so we've got a number of different projects on the go in that area.
Yep.
So one is the walking and cycling strategy. So that's that strategic document. Then we've also got this the planning studies that are being done, which are the north-south one, which goes all the way from Perigian all the way up to Noosa Heads, and then we've got the other one which goes from Tewantin across to Noosa Heads. So, and what happens is that they're coming into a number of areas where we're trying to investigate in more detail as to what needs to be done. So we have got the boardwalk which goes over the hill, and if we were to be putting in, for example, if we found it necessary to put in a transit lane over that hill, would we build that transit lane on the one side, which involves taking out a lot of trees and building a major piece of structure, or do we look at building it on the other side where that boardwalk is? So what we need to do is we need to come up with a plan for what is... Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. So what we need to do is we need to look at how we're going to connect the Noosa Heads area to the junction. And part of this work is how we're going to do that. So it's not just, everybody looks at that downhill leg that goes down past Lions Park. But what we've also got is that other part that goes from the hotel and goes down to the roundabout in the junction there. And where should we be putting the footpath there? Should we be putting on the southern side or the northern side? So we want to come up with a general intent of what the most efficient, effective way is of getting people to get across to Noosa Heads from the junction. Look at the different modes of transport that we've got, and then that will inform us later on for discrete projects that come out of that. Does that answer your question?
Very well.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further?
No.
Claire, what do you?
Just on street lighting, it's just develop a plan for street lighting. Does that include places, Carl, that we can add lights? Like I've had some people worried about like lighting in the junction or the leisure centre at night, things like that.
Yeah, so that's more about street lighting rather than around buildings and precincts.
Okay. Yeah.
We have had a policy in the past of limiting the amount of street lighting that we have. Okay. So, and that's, so we don't meet necessarily all of the standards for light levels at roundabouts that TMR would be designing their roundabouts for. And that's partially because we don't want it lit up like a Christmas tree. We want the place to still feel like it's a village feel. And we're also putting the vegetation, you know, and the trees in front of light levels. So it's a real delicate balance as to whether we light things up to very high levels, which is also very costly, or whether we want that more laid-back village feel to it. And it's a very fine line. And yes, we are investigating all of that. We most of that lighting that we've got out there for street lighting is handled by Energex completely. We don't have anybody in council that's an expert at lighting. We don't have any maintenance crews for lighting.
Okay.
So it's all done by Energex in that regard, and it's their asset.
But there is some lighting that is council control.
There is some, yes, but it's usually the smaller stuff, and we usually have to get a contractor to come in and do that.
Okay.
So that would be increasing the levels of service, and we'd have to, there would be an additional cost associated with it. It's a really fine line.
But we are looking at increasing that to potentially lighting for safety reasons in those roundabouts.
In certain areas, yes, yeah.
And pedestrian crossing.
Yeah.
So we're looking at doing an audit of all of our roundabouts with the light levels,
Yeah.
and that will be hopefully brought up through the executive team
Okay.
and reporting to council on those.
Right, thank you.
There's also an interesting movement, just for information, called the Dark Sky Alliance, which is a
I know,
quite
it's
interesting
exciting.
group. Yeah, about how you actually manage light in urban areas so that people can still see stars. And it's about the design, having downward facing the types of lights and making sure you've got enough lights for safety, but not be able to lose what you look up and see.
Yep.
So.
Part of the future of lighting upgrades too is upgrading to LEDs with
Yep.
capacity for lights to actually be turned off or dimmed during sessions when they're not required as cars approach for the lights to actually come on and come off. That's all to do with technology of LED lighting going forward and things along those lines that have been looked at.
The other problem that you do have with the LEDs is that you can't just replace them one light at a time.
Yeah.
You literally have to get rid of all the lights down a road and replace them. So some of them, they might have had their bulbs put in there 1 year ago. So it's not actually efficient to necessarily do it that way. So, but we are in discussions with Energex to upgrade the lights slowly to LEDs.
Thank you.
Now, Carl, I know Hector and Tiwa Street gravel road reseal projects have been completed because I drove on them the other day. Lovely to see that one being finished. I noticed Ambulance Street is still to be done. Is that likely to be completed in the remainder of the financial year?
Yes.
Is it?
Yep.
I must have missed it.
I've already had somebody.
I just know it's in the next quarter. I'm just checking that it is going to be completed.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's the only other question from me. I've asked a question about AWD plant. They started getting back to me on the specifics of that. That's it from me. If no one's got anything further, do I have a mover? Claire? Frank will second it. No further questions of that?
Thanks.
All in favour? Thank you. Thanks, Carl.
No worries. Thank you very much. See you all later.
Thank you.
Where are we at? We've got Michael on.
Michael's here. Are you there, Michael?
Yeah.
Hello, Michael.
No.
Item 9, Corporate Services Department update. Questions, councillors?
I'm not sure you want me to start, Michael, because I've got quite a few questions.
Well, we've got to start somewhere. Away you go.
Page 88, special projects. This is something that I'd actually like referred to the General Committee.
88.
Page 88, I think 89, sorry, special projects. Okay. It's in regards to website property monitoring of short-term accommodation sites that are now rolled across all key suburbs and precincts. I've got to say that when I read that, I was quite shocked. My first reaction was, this is an invasion of privacy. And I also thought it's not illegal for residents to provide short-term accommodation. Anyway, when I asked for some more information, I was told by yourself actually, Michael, that Council commissioned B&B Guard to assist with identifying addresses for properties offered for short-term accommodation, e.g. stays and Airbnb. I was also told that the data that's used to find out whether a property is paying the tourism and economic levy. If Council identifies a new property, they write to the property owner advising that this levy will be applied from the next rating period, quote unquote. Again, this took me by surprise. This is my first lot of many questions that I'm about to ask, and I also ask that the other committee members allow me to finish my run of questions before interjecting. My first question is, on what authority or Which legislation are you relying upon to push this levy? Is it lawful, and where can I find the council meeting minutes that approve this levy?
I can answer that if you want. It's the Local Government Act, where we set levies, and the decision would have been at the time the council adopted the last budget. So the tourism and economic levy is part of the budget document.
Okay.
And
more questions.
Who that applies to, doesn't it?
Yep.
Okay, more questions. Who is B&B Guard? When did council commission B&B Guard? For what reason and at what cost?
Yep, Michael, do you want to just outline when we started using them? It was about 2 years ago, I think.
Look, if this is going to be referred to general, why don't we just deal with it there?
Oh, is
Well,
that
maybe
the process? I'm not sure, Michael. I've been here 3 weeks.
Well, generally, if a report's being referred to general committee,
It stays.
then
I haven't.
the discussion occurs at general committee.
This is the first I've heard of it being referred to general committee at this stage. I haven't heard a resolution one way or the other, Michael. So at the moment we've just got questions in front of us. So are you seeking more information with regard to this and want to put a series of questions together, Councillor, or do you want the questions answered here and now, taken on notice?
I would like to ask some questions now and still refer it to general meeting. Is that how the process works?
Yeah, normally the report will be referred to general committee if the recommendation wasn't agreed to, and this is a recommendation to adopt an update report. It's not about adopting individual items within that. Simply a report for information to council what activity each of the departments has been doing.
Okay. So can I continue with my line of questions
then?
then?
The chair.
I don't have a problem with it. See how far this goes.
Okay. So who is B&B Guard? When did council commission B&B Guard? For what reason and at what cost?
I can answer part of that. Obviously, we commission them to identify properties that are being used for Airbnb so that we can determine their location. Michael might be able to recall how long ago. My recollection is about 2 years ago. Or thereabouts. So what was the other part of the question?
What cost?
What cost?
Yeah, what cost? I noticed I couldn't get that off the top of my head.
Okay. In regards to the imposition of a tourist and economic levy, do residents actually know that this is happening? That their property's been offered for short-term, that if their property's been offered for short-term accommodation, they are going to be asked to pay a tourism and economic levy. Was there any community consultation?
I'll give you a bit of that background. The tourism, originally called the tourism levy, started in 2001, and it was requested by the tourism sector to raise funds to promote the Shire, and it's been in place in one form or another since 2001. So properties, for example, I'll probably break them into what I call the Airbnb, which is more of a recent type of thing. So properties back in the 2000s which were used for short-term accommodation, rented out, have paid that levy since that time. There's been no change in terms of essentially who's paying that. There's been a couple of minor refinements of how that works. So for example, maybe 2 years ago we recognised that some of the properties that were being used for short-term accommodation were also being used by people to live in, so people were renting out 1 or 2 rooms in a property, and we introduced as part of the budget process through the policy particular discounts, so they only paid, I think it's a third, 33% of the levy, but properties have been used for short-term accommodation, been paying that levy since about 2001.
Okay. I think that I'm a little bit confused. My short-term accommodation doesn't use existing resources. There's no need for extra roads, there's no need for extra infrastructure. It means that council doesn't have to build more hotels. So I'm still confused why residents have been asked to pay this levy. Short-term accommodation injects money into our economy, and most of these short-term accommodations are existing empty rooms that just lay dormant in people's homes. Can you explain?
Yeah, sure. Understand that it's a levy, not going into general rates. So the difference between the levy and general rates. So the levy can only be used for the purpose for which it was raised. And in this case, the levy is primarily, a large amount of that levy is then paid to Tourism Noosa for promotion of the Shire and the location. And other elements of the levy are used purely for economic development, issues. So none of the levy raised is put into what I call consolidated revenue, for want of a better phrase, in terms of going towards roads or parks or anything like that.
One of the reasons the short-term letting accommodation providers would pay that levy is that they get the benefit of the promotion of Noosa as a region for people to then utilise their short-term accommodation.
So let's talk about the short-term holiday managed accommodation places.
Can I just clarify one point that you made there as well? You suggested that council build resorts or hotels, or the like. Council aren't responsible for building any type of short-term accommodation provision.
Okay. What does council charge in levies for a room at the Sofitel or a holiday managed unit in a resort? Do you know off by heart?
As far as the tourism and economic levy goes?
The tourism and economic levy.
Charged on the property, I think.
But the property would pay the tourism and economic.
So how does that compare to the levy that is imposed on residents?
Well, no.
Depends on the value of the property.
So under the policy, which is in the budget documents, we have a formula we use, which determines, based on unimproved capital value and cents in the dollar, which determines what each property would pay who is obliged to pay the tourism and economic levy.
Yep.
So they run through that formula through the rates. I can't obviously do individual properties off the top of my head.
Okay. Where's all this information kept, and who can access this information?
It's all online on the website, and it's part of the adopted budget. So in the budget documents, we have policies that deal with our each and every levy. We have individual levies, whether for location, for example, Hastings Street or Noosa Junction or what have you. But all of our levies each year we adopt as part of the budget process, which identifies what the levy is for, how much it is, how it's calculated, what its purpose is, as part of the revenue statement each year.
Councillor, I suggest probably the questions are more pertinent to the budget process than the report on the ongoing activities of the department as it stands at present. I mean, I'm prepared to give you a bit more leniency with regard to your questions down this path.
Okay, just two more questions. Joe, do you think it's reasonable that we should be, in fact, even asking for a tourism and economic levy?
I don't know if that's a question.
That's not your question.
That's the council budget question.
Okay, and finally, is it possible that the only reason council has commissioned B&B Guard to collate this data is because it gives council an opportunity to control short-term accommodation, and two, it's an opportunity for council to cash grab from residents by imposing a levy?
I think that's an unfair question in terms of asking a judgment about motivation.
Sure.
I
think the levy is unfair and inequitable.
Well,
we'll take that as a comment, Tony.
I think that in regard to what the department is achieving in this quarter, that's probably a question more for the budget process and a deliberation in the budget process than it is for the matter before us, if that's acceptable, Councillor.
Sure.
The council has every right to strike out that element of
you've got every right to
the
raise
tourism
those
levy
issues
during the budget talks.
I was just really outraged, that's all.
That's fair enough.
Been going on since 2001.
That's fair enough. I think, again, they're questions for the budget process as we go forward, and once we get into that, we get those deliberations and those opportunities to discuss each of those elements that you raised.
The monitoring process hasn't, though, Frank. The monitoring process has been happening for 2 years.
That's right.
Okay,
Yes,
so
that's quite true. I was Director of Corporate Services back in the 2000s. We used to monitor all the short-term let properties in those days as well, through websites, through advertising and so on, to identify properties who were benefiting from the promotion of the Shire and who should be contributing through the levy.
B&B Guard's a new method of
detecting that. Just a means of
but in terms of the process, that's been in place since about, I joined in 2001, it's been in place since then.
Yeah. Question for Michael. 2021 budget development timetable milestones achieved. Is that a note for, is that like an internal, these are internal milestones, Michael?
Sorry, Frank, where are you?
Page 89.
Page 89, under budget?
Sorry, my apologies.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything further, Frank?
Page 92, undertake early adoption project with Technology One to implement the new CI Anywhere contracts module. What does that mean, Michael, please? What does contracts, the the Anywhere Contracts module deliver in terms of your services?
It effectively allows us to monitor contracts that are over $200,000 that have been approved by council, and there's functionality in the system that allows us to obviously manage those contracts from inception through to completion. There's functionality that allows us to workflow approvals, delegations and so on, and it also satisfies our external audit requirements to report on our contractual commitments over the next 5 years. So that was another driver. There was an outstanding audit recommendation to develop this module.
Okay. And just on page 91, transition to remote working for staff. I guess it's a more general question, and the CEO might want to answer this. It's about, has there been any thought to about what working for Noosa Council may look like after this COVID crisis is over in terms of staff's capacity to work from home? Will they be given that option?
Yeah, we've had this discussion, the exec team actually, in the last week or two, that some of our staff have really taken it to it like, fish to water. And it really depends on the nature of the person and the nature of the job. So some of the introverts love it. They can sit and work quietly and diligently and getting more done, and particularly if the nature of the work means they can work on their own. Some of the other staff have struggled a bit, that's the extroverts or the people where they need to interrelate a lot with other staff with the nature of the job or bounce ideas off. So
maybe they have an element of where there's distraction at home as well. With,
sure.
With
and
kids
it's been
at
difficult
home.
for a lot of people who are doing home schooling at the moment as well. So we'll have some staff who would like to do more work from home, and we're certainly open to that.
Okay, there's no philosophical objection.
No, not at all. In fact, what we said is, it depends on the nature of the team and the manager and how they're going to work, but we've made it pretty clear that as we come back, whenever that might be, that I suspect we'll see a lot of staff maybe working from home for 2 days, or and then coming in for 3 days or something like that.
So there'll be less traffic on the road, less travel costs for them. They're delivering the service just as effectively.
Yep.
Yeah.
How would you assess, for want of a better term, value for money from staff working at home as opposed to working?
The job's getting done.
Whether things are being completed.
Yeah, and Michael's a good example actually. He has in his area, he always puts down a couple, what term do you use, Michael? Deliverables for the day or something like that, where, what have they got to get through, and that's very good for processing type jobs. You can tell whether, a particular accounts payable run's
some
been
form of
done.
KPI or something like that.
I've just got two.
I've just got
two quick questions.
Please.
Michael, just with the fleet replacement and maintenance program, are we able to source those or any new sort of cars or trucks or whatever locally in that replacement and maintenance program?
Yeah, obviously we when we go out to tender or procurement, quite a lot of the local dealers get those contracts clear. They because they're generally the local distributor of particularly Isuzu and so on, Mitsubishi. So yeah, look, the local suppliers generally do okay, particularly with our small fleet. Obviously some of the bigger plant, the yellow plant, is a little bit more problematic, and that generally comes from Brisbane.
Yeah, and I imagine going forward it's probably even more important in the coming years to buy local, to sort of help our local if we can, if the price differentiation isn't too severe.
Yeah, no, look, generally a lot of those arrangements, they might be it could be a national panel arrangement through local buy. However, the local supplier gets the contract through the national arrangement. So I think it works quite well for our local suppliers.
There'd be an element of maintenance in that as well, wouldn't there, Michael? The vehicle maintenance would go to the local outlet?
Maintenance, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah, look, pretty much all of our maintenance is locally provided from our local suppliers.
Michael, the last question I had was on page 92 about the holiday parks. Look, I think with these parks we're going to face the same challenges as reopening like the leisure centre and the NAC, and it's going to be a very staggered approach. At what point does this become economically viable to reopen these parks? Is there a plan in place?
Great question. Great question. And,
I know the grey nomads have died to get out there.
Currently being analysed, Claire.
Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Sorry, Amelia, I can't. We exhausted one avenue of questioning before. Is there any other questions you've got on the report?
No, all good. Thank you, Joe.
All right, I don't think I've got anything further, Michael. So can I have a mover for the report?
I'll move.
And a second to Claire. All in favour? Thank you. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Item 10, Executive Services Department Report. Deb.
Yeah.
Councillors, any questions for Deb on the report of the progress of the department?
I only had one question, Deb.
Yeah,
About
sure.
the 14 insurance claims. What were they mainly from?
Oh, look, they're fairly steady. There's often things around trees, and that's often related to weather problems, like if you get storms or something like that. There's some insurance claims to do with, motor vehicles and motor vehicle incidents and things like that. They're normally smaller scale
Trips
stuff.
and slips,
You'll often, like for example, somebody's stormwater draining has been infected by roots from a tree on council land, and that's an issue that we have to investigate. So. Yeah, they're mainly smaller things.
What's the approximate annual payout for those claims?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I'd have to take that out on notice. It's not significant. It's not significant. We manage our claims actually very well, and so they're normally smaller amounts.
Yeah. Who's council's insurer?
For these sorts of claims, for public liability, LGM, it's a scheme, and for our work cover, it's LGW.
So they're both member mutual schemes. So all the councils in Queensland together underwrite together. So they have a scheme coordinator, and we share the risk.
Right.
So about 70-something councils in.
Okay, so it's a collaborative approach.
Yeah, and we have a number of policies. That scheme actually sources insurance for the members of the scheme, of course, but it covers a broad spectrum of the different types of insurances that we need to run our business and provide services. So there's a number of, everything from marine hull through to public liability, through to cyber risk, and we've actually we're just going out for our next year insurance coverage. So
okay, thank you.
Page 97, preparation of VELPIC training pack for all staff on compliance with human rights. VELPIC's a brand name, I guess.
VELPIC, yeah, it's our training, it's our system where our staff can do online training.
Okay, and compliance with human rights, that wouldn't involve any major changes to the way this organisation's already operating.
Oh my goodness me. It
will. Is it?
The Human Rights Act is brought in. The Human Rights Commission administers the Human Rights Act as well as the Anti-Discrimination Act. And with the Human Rights Act, there's requirements. On council, particularly in our decision-making processes, to make sure that we comply. For example, it might be. I'll use this as an example. It's probably not the best example. When we're purchasing certain services, that those services are provided by suppliers who put in place ethical practices with regards to their labour and things like that. So there's a number of areas. There's about 23 areas that are actually covered, and we are actually reviewing our council policies to make sure we do comply with the requirements of the Human Rights Act. We've done a little bit of training with staff already, and we will be doing more, and we've just had an independent review of our policies to make sure that we do comply, and I'm just about to start looking at those to see where we might need to make improvements.
To ensure there's an ethical supply chain.
Yeah. So there are, and it is, the supply area is one area. Some other areas are things around access and things, access as well. So
access to buildings and equal opportunity, equal access.
Yeah. So there's a number of areas there. I had a feeling, Brett, I think we've reported this to council, the previous council, but not to, of course, to new council. But I'm happy to distribute some information around to the councillors about that if they'd like to.
The main changes that we may see.
Yeah. All right. I'm happy to do that.
No, all good.
Yeah, and the other one is prepare draft conflict of interest policy. Who's that for staff?
That's generally for council. Yes, for staff.
Yeah. So are you saying there wasn't one?
Not specifically. Conflicts of interest is normally dealt with in a number of our other policies, but this is a specific policy on it to be very clear. It's something we've also identified in our internal audit. So, and it's an area of improvement by being quite specific on the conflicts of interest for staff. It is covered in our Employee Code of Conduct.
Yes, I thought so.
Yeah.
So you have a register of interest for staff, key staff as well, don't you?
Yes.
Managers and directors. And,
Yes, we do.
Self and directors.
Yeah, and we even declare for our, related parties as well.
Yes. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
I had to have a chuckle to myself, Deb, when I read page.
Oh, not the
page
training
through.
budget.
No, recruitment and training, continued training of 3 new casuals within the Noosability building.
Yes.
When did we build the Noosability building?
No, so Noosability is the project name for the ICT systems work that they've been doing, and we actually rent an office up the road, and our community, our customer service actually moved in there because we had trouble with our customer interface with the COVID, so they've actually been working from up the road.
Oh, so there is literally a Noosability building.
Yes, it's labelled Noosability.
I thought I'd misread that as meaning a capability building,
No, it's the Noosability project, and it's run by Michael, and it's
I knew about the
to...
Noosability project, but I read that as a Noosability building being some sort of a structure. There is actually a structure associated with it.
Yeah.
It wasn't what I anticipated the answer to be, so thank you.
No.
That's it from me.
Okay.
Can I have a move?
Thanks, Deb.
Thanks.
Council.
You move, I'll second then.
Frank, second. Claire, all in favour? Thank you.
Thanks, Deb.
Thanks,
No
Deb.
worries.
Thank you, Deb.
Item 11, operational plan progress report, third quarter. With the CEO, any questions for the CEO on this report?
Might just outline a bit of the background of this and why.
Might be a good place to start.
So I report every 3 months on some of the key issues. The operational plan is that plan that's adopted as part of the budget each year, which is what are the top 20 or 30 projects the council's focusing on for that year. So I give you an update every 3 months that covers that. What's not a statutory obligation is to deal with KPIs, organisational KPIs. So we put those as a added extra, so to speak, and I don't know that too many other councils do that. So give more information just about how the organisation is travelling. So you'll see on the first page of the report, it's really about where this fits in. Is that we've got the corporate plan. I'll give you a report on that once a year, normally in July, just about some of the long-term projects, how that's going, and then the operational plan is we get quarterly. A lot of what in the branch plans is what the departments have just been giving you over the last day, which is what are they working on at an operational level. We've got the financial reports which come every month, so you'll get one of those at the general committee meeting every month. You saw the first one of those at the ordinary meeting last week. And every 3 months they're going to cover work. So there's a fair bit of reporting that sits in that structure to keep you informed about what's happening. And then in the operational plan update, what I do is to run through, where we're up to overall with some of our major projects, what's ahead, what's behind, if they're behind, why are they behind, and put that detail in the attachments, and then also some information about KPIs, what's happening organisationally in terms of staff or customers or finance or whatever it might be. And give a few comments on that as well. That's just an overview if you like. Have you taken any questions?
Mayor, have you got any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Frank?
No, the KPI graphs are very useful.
Yeah, one I'm a bit nervous about the.
We've already gone ahead of the question.
No. Our workplace health and safety. Maybe just talk about that a bit. We had.
What page are you on, Ben?
So if you have a look on, just let me get the page up. 115.
Yeah.
In terms of the graphs. So one of the things that we struggled with in the first year or two after the amalgamation was getting our systems in place to have good workplace health and safety. We had to really start from scratch, and we struggled for about 2 or 3 years. And we started to get more serious about it, probably 3 or 4 years ago, and spent a lot of time and effort. And last year, for the first time, we saw our premium go down, which is good for the first time. I've just got advice since I've done this report that it's going to go up again next year. So I've asked Deb to dig into why that is, because it's normally a bit of a lag and a consequence of your number of claims and the value of the claim. So while we've had much improved sort of compliance in terms of all our documentation and process, and we've been audited and all that sort of stuff's gone well, It hasn't flowed through to some of our number of claims and the value of claims yet, and just got to dig a bit further onto that. So that's one of the things that I probably will spend a bit more time on in the coming months, have a look at how we can improve that.
Can I ask on that point, Brett, is that related in any way to the spike in lost time to injury
It is
back in August, September last year? It's a huge
It was a
spike.
massive spike.
No, so if you have a look at those colours, so if you, the dark line, just to explain how the graphs work, so the dark line is the 18-19 data, so that would have been August, September 2018.
Oh.
Whereas the purple dotted line is 2017-18, so you can sort of see, compare from year to year what the stats are, and then the blue line is this year, this financial year. So it's certainly come up again over the last 4 months or so.
Yeah.
So can you
Would that be COVID related though?
No, this would be before that, because you know, December, January, February was COVID, and only March was really half of it. So
can you cast your mind back to August, September
I know, I was thinking
in
that.
in 1890? What happened then, Brett?
I can't recall. I know we had
Some of the
one
alcohol
major claim at that stage. You might recall the tragic passing of one of our staff who was driving home.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a major claim, because she was still on work time when she was hit by that car, by the truck, I should say. So I'm pretty sure that's not related to that particular spike, but it may be related to the insurance premium, because that was a major claim, and we're still then got a chase to get that back off the truck driver who went to jail.
Yeah.
It was a fatality, wasn't it?
It was.
Oh, yeah.
Very difficult time.
It was. Yeah. Love it. No further? I've got a couple, if I may.
Yep.
We go back to, obviously, page 107, we talk about the final adoption of the new Noosa planning scheme. Obviously, there's a lot of people in the community interested to know where we're at with the planning scheme and when final adoption may progress. What is the time frame? I know we've got a planning scheme update this week scheduled for councillors in a workshop. What's the planned time frame for the planning scheme from here?
We'll have that workshop, depending on what issues the councillors raise or what other work you want done. It'll be up to I'll talk to the mayor about the timing to bring that forward then after that workshop.
Okay, the second question comes up in our people on page 108.
Yep.
The last paragraph there was of concern. Our staff turnover was unusually high in the March quarter, normally quiet in the September quarter after a retirement quarter, but any reasons as to why the March quarter?
Election. No one wanted to be here.
Did we really drive them mad? Did we really drive them mad on the whole point of worry about council turnover?
No, it wasn't that. I had looked through the list actually. I got colleagues to be out for me to have a look at the list of stuff. There's no sort of apparent reason that I could see. There was nothing that was untoward or nothing unusual.
Was it any? Were they unforeseen?
Yeah, most of them, and they're all from different areas across the organisation. I was mainly looking to see if there was a pocket of issues or something like that, but there was no particular rhyme or reason that I could see, Joe.
Okay, so opportunities, better opportunities beyond, or retirements, or
there were,
you know, where were they in their work progress? I guess
there were two that I retired. The rest was different reasons, family reasons, or other jobs, or whatever it might be.
Unusual.
Yeah, it is a bit unusual. It's the first time I've seen that in probably 4 or 5 years.
Well, I said I can't recall seeing it since in 6 years of 6.5 years of council, so that was why it made me look back. But okay, I'll take it on your advisement. It's a one-off, and we'll see where we go from there. They were the only two questions I had from the report.
Can I jump to page 119? It's percentage of requests for service that were lodged electronically. Can we take from that 60-70% of our community will still prefer to ring the council to lodge a request and talk to somebody?
Yeah, there's still a lot of that. That probably reflects a bit of the demographic of the Shire as well. But, we're getting about 200 to 240 phone calls a day through the front counter, which are coming direct to our general line, and probably 70% of those are dealt with, or 80% of those are dealt with in that one-stop shop type approach.
Yeah.
This has been improving. Like when we first started, it's down around that 20-25%. We're getting up around 35%. And that's we only started recording these about 2 years ago. So I still want to get up over 40-50%.
So that means we're only getting 30 to 40 sort of requests a day via email and scratch and solid.
Most of those are you, Joe.
I know that. Stands inside normally.
No, look, the other thing we've got, Michael, it was in Michael's report, just very briefly, we've got our current web interface for people to lodge online requests is not very intuitive. So we've got a new one coming, which should be within about the next 3 to 6 months. It'll make it a lot easier for people to jump on our website as well. We're getting a lot of stuff through Snap Seen Sold and emails and things like that. But a bit more transactional stuff happening through the website would be good.
Yet over 90% of people are happy to pay electronically.
That's right. Because people are used to
So
net
they're not-
banking or whatever it might be, they're e-banking.
Yeah, so they're tech savvy.
Yeah.
But they still want to talk to somebody.
But you know, if I took my mother, she would go online and do her banking online. But if she wanted to deal with something untoward, she would ring up.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of that.
I reckon at the moment through COVID-19, it's probably spiking. People are desperate to talk to somebody because they can't talk to them.
Isolated.
Yeah.
So the number of calls actually, as soon as COVID happened, actually went down to all, but it is building up again because people are anxious or wanting to talk to people. So it's been interesting.
We did the Executive Services Department report. Any comment?
Yeah,
we did.
I said just noticed you hadn't got a mover a second.
I was out.
Oh, it's it was Frank and Claire.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say before we finalise this item, Mr. CEO, because this committee isn't normally telecast, it's normally one that people can come in to view and all the rest of it. I just thought we might explain moving and seconding of these items and what happens from here. It's not that we have approved these at this level. This is just a recommendation going forward from this committee to either the General Committee for items that have been referred on, or to the ordinary meeting for ratification of the Council and final decision making. So people understand that these are decisions that have been formalised here at this process. It's just to acknowledge and accept the recommendation of the committee to go forward for finalisation at either the ordinary meeting or further discussion at the general meeting before these items are signed off on by the council at this month's series of meetings. So if I can get a mover for the operational plan, Amelia, I'll second that. There being no further discussion or questions, all in favour? Thank you. Again, that item then gets referred to the ordinary meeting for finalisation for this month. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.